Welcome to the May 9th meeting of the Planning Policy Commission. Tonight we have a fun meeting planned in introducing the new members of our commission. But first, I would like to get permission from the commission to change the agenda so that the election of the chair and vice chair will be at the end of the meeting. If that's okay with you, then that's what we'll do. Okay. With that, I need a motion to approve the minutes of March 28th.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of March 28th, 2019.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any questions, discussions, changes? Is our scribe just absolutely perfect and needs no changes? So with that, I'll call for the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Before we get into our program, I'd like to introduce our two new members. And normally we just have the new members say something about, you know, how long they've been in the city, half a second of what their plans are and why they're here. But I kind of, since you guys don't know us, I think we should be included in updating the community of who we are, us old members here on the commission, and just kind of, you know, saying a few words of why we're here and how long we've been here. So with that, I'm going to start with me, since I was actually up for renewal this year. And I just wanted to say I've been on the commission for a while, been a chair for a while. I have a long history in Issaquah, like 35 years I think I've lived here, and so I've watched it grow. I've enjoyed being part of that, of making some of those decisions. And I also think that even with all the background that I have, I still think I can think out of the box and see more creative ways maybe of doing things. So with that, Ron. Oh, I'm Joan Probola. Go.
So, Ron Fall, I've been on PPC for 3 years, and I think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and I welcome you guys to PPC. And it's a great stepping stone to City Council as well. City Council's already taken 2 of our people. So they just stole them from us, but we won't get into that.
Come down with, yeah, and just taken back up in the green monster.
All right, and Robin?
Robin Buchers. I've lived in Issaquah for roughly 20 years. Been involved with the Chamber of Commerce off and on for most of that time, and have been in a position of expressing my concerns about what I see happening with as this work grows for some time. And I thought that it would be useful for me and hopefully for the city to add whatever background I have to ask questions and give some direction to the growth of the city going forward. So thanks very much.
I'm Tom Haskins. I'm a new PBC member. I've lived in Issaquah for 2 years. I've been in the Pacific Northwest for 4 years. Went to UW, which is how I ended up out here from New York. And Issaquah is the only place that's really felt like home since I moved out here, which is why I wanted to serve on this mission.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Bill Reinhardt, been in town for about 9 years now. I really enjoyed being on PPC, being able to assist the city, represent the people of Issaquah with a small hometown feel. Like being able to be a part of the planning process rather than sitting on the sidelines, really kind of jumping in and helping the city grow in a responsible manner.
I'm Joy Lewis, and I've been in Issaquah for about 6.5 years, and I actually live just outside of city limits and enjoy looking at Tiger Mountain most days. So I have been a big advocate of how we want to integrate green spaces into our growth, and I'm really privileged to be able to volunteer and help make this city better.
So those, there are 2 members that, new members that I've been out of town, so they're not here. So the next meeting, they can do the same thing and introduce themselves to the hundreds and millions of people that are out there watching this committee. So thank you for signing up, all of you, and I'm looking for a robust discussions this year from all of you. And I think knowing you, at least some of you personally, I know I'm going to get that. So tonight on the agenda, we're going to have two presentations by the city. The first one is an update, our yearly update on the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Plan. And after that, we're going to have a housing report card of where we are in the way of, is our city doing the right thing? Are we coming up to provide the right kind of housing for every facet of our community? So, but first, we're going to talk about transportation, our favorite subject. And it's going to be presented by the engineering manager of the city, Kurt Seaman. So, Kurt, you're on.
Okay, thank you very much. Kurt Seaman, Transportation Manager here at the City of Issaquah. I've got a few slides here. Very happy to be here to share with you our, I guess we'll call this the draft transportation plan for 2020-2025. This has not been through the council adoption process. That's happening later this year in June, July timeframe. I think it actually goes for final adoption in early July 1st, yeah. So along with our overall capital improvement plan. So just really briefly why we do a TIP. There's a whole bunch of reasons, but the two, I guess, legal reasons are it's required by the RCW that every city, town, jurisdiction in the state have an updated TIP. We do this once a year, every year, for the 6 years going forward. And then important to us, important to the city, is it does help with funding eligibility. So PSRC, TIB, other funding agencies, when they're looking at cities' requests for funding for grants and that kind of thing, are looking at their TIPs. So that's those, and then we'll talk about the other reasons that we do it that are helpful to our city, but those are the big picture reasons. And so a little confusing with all these initials, I know. So we have this thing called the CIP, and that's our capital improvement plan, and that is what is the guidance for how the city spends capital. This is what will be adopted by council in July. And within that capital improvement plan, there's all these different, find my mouse here, there's all these different pieces. So there's technology, capital equipment, municipal facilities, trails, parks, stormwater, water, and sewer. All of those are pieces of the capital plan, the CIP. So it's this bigger piece, and what we're talking about tonight is a subset of that. I don't know if it's this big in relative to the whole plan, but just to illustrate where it is in the overall picture. So I know it's confusing, so a lot of initials flying around out there. So what is when we talk about a capital project in transportation, just real briefly, what are we talking about, and what are the steps usually that we go through? We usually start with a feasibility process that has a heavy planning component to it to see if what we're talking about is a feasible, valuable project supporting the community goals. Once we move past that, we do a schematic design. Sometimes we call that maybe a 5-10% planning level design estimate that gives us some better idea of what the project might look like in design, and then also a better idea of how much it would cost, which then leads us to the next step here, which is funding and getting funding, at least funding to get started on the project. As you'll see here in a moment, we don't necessarily have funding to take projects all the way through to construction, but funding is certainly always a key and difficult component of any project. And then we move toward, sometimes funding and final design are happening at the same time on projects, but we do need to do a final design. That is preparing the construction plans that we then go out to bid the project and have it constructed by a contractor. So that's the overall picture, and this is, if this looks blurry, it's not your eyes. This is intentionally blurry because we don't, at this point, just want to show you what a TIP plan looks like. And I don't want to, if we showed you all the details, we'd probably get into the details, and I'm certainly happy to do that as soon as I get through the rest of this. But this is just meant to show you what the TIP looks like in the big picture. It has sort of two components the way we've structured it. We call it the projects above the line, above the double line, which are these projects here. And as you can see, these are the first 6 years. These projects have funding associated with them through the first 6 years and are the core of the TIP. And then there's a whole bunch of other projects here that, as you can see in these first 6 years, have no funding associated with them. And the funding is all what we call the out years beyond the first 6 years. So again, not trying to hide anything from anybody, but I don't want to go into the details quite yet until I can share a couple other slides with you. So we can come back to the details of this. And you have the detailed list of projects and this list written in a way you can see it in your packet, I believe. And it's also online in the packet. So not trying to hide anything here. It's available both to citizens that look at this packet online and to you all. So we have divided this, what I call the above-the-line projects, into 4 project types. And I want to talk briefly about what those project types are and the projects that are the above-the-line projects that fit into those 4 project types. So there's corridor enhancements. Those are either enhance existing corridors or construct new corridors. Same idea with intersections. Those can be improvements to an intersection or constructing new intersection improvements. Pedestrian projects can do more than one thing, but their primary focus is to enhance pedestrian safety and enhance pedestrian connectivity. And then maintenance is pretty self-explanatory. It's maintaining our existing infrastructure, which sometimes in some people's minds is not as exciting as building new stuff, but it's certainly, if you can't maintain what you build, then it's sort of pointless to keep building new projects than if you can't maintain what you have. So
Art, can I ask you a question?
certainly,
So if you go back to the blurry
of course.
thing, could you explain to the new commissioners, there's amounts of money all the way in different years,
Sure.
and how you come up with those kinds of
Yeah,
numbers?
and I can maybe in a general way, I can explain
General,
that now.
I'd like them, because they're going to ask
Sure.
questions specifically that,
Because we can look at the one that's more focused, or you can look at the one in your packet. But these are the projects, the above-the-line projects that I'm going to talk about tonight. These are the years starting with 2020, because this is the 2020 through 21, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those 6 years. And so these are each of the years, and we have money, as you can see, for these projects set aside for each of the years from starting next year through 2025. And that's does some portion of the project. You can see by the money out here in these, what we call the out years, there's still money necessary to complete the project that doesn't get funded in the first 6 years. So it's a little confusing, I think, at first if you're not used to looking at this. You've got these projects, but you don't have them completely funded, but yet you're working on them anyway. And I don't know how to explain that exactly, except that that's the process, and that's if we waited. I guess the one way to think about it is if we waited until we had a complete funding for every project, we would never get started with anything, because it's rare that you would have complete funding for, especially the larger projects. Some of these projects are $30, $40, $50 million. Does that help you with what you're?
Could I just a follow-up question?
Sure,
So
of course.
The numbers that I see here in the first 5 years, are those amounts the total amount you estimate to be spent in that year on that
Yes.
project? Or is that net of the amount that a grant or federal funding or state, whatever?
This is the
Yeah.
total, this is, this includes, this is the total amount meant to be spent in each year and includes, it's the total amount we're planning to spend on the project in those years.
So it may be 100% funded in those 5 years, or it may not be. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a case where any of this is 100% funded, so, but there may be a funding component to these numbers, I guess is a better way to say it.
So one last question.
Sure.
So I understand the answer, but again, those are estimates where you think that you might get funding. You haven't actually secured that funding in the next 6 years, right?
So again, back to the previous question, it's a mix, some of the projects, so let's take the two Newport Way projects, which are big projects. They're both in the tens of millions of dollars, and they have, in our design for those projects, which is where we're at now, we have some money acquired already set aside from grants for those projects. So some of the money that we're spending is our money matching grants. Some of the money we're spending is grant money. So we can get into more details. I think hopefully it's a little more. I know that it's more clearly spelled out in the funding sheets that accompany each of these projects. And I don't know, did they get just the project descriptions and the funding?
They got the 60 pages.
Okay, I think those are just the descriptions. There's an accompanying piece if you're really interested. Again, I don't know how much you want to get into the details here,
I
but
don't
there
want
is
to, I don't want to get into that kind of a detail. I just want to be specific because this question comes up every year. In 4 years, you have this long list of funds that you think that you're going to expect to spend.
Correct.
So is that automatically going into the budget, or is it they are possible funds that you can go out and acquire from other entities?
These are the costs that we expect to spend on the projects over the next 6 years. Some of them are already, we have grants secured for some of the money.
Okay.
Some of the projects in here, let's just pick a project like Providence Point, for example. That's about an $8 million project that currently, as we speak tonight, I know council is going to be talking about this more, I think, next Monday. We still don't have that project officially funded. So it's on the list. It's an $8 million project. The money spent over the next we're showing the money spent over the next few years, both for design and construction of that project, but we don't have $8 million today.
That's
Setting aside.
understood. I don't think you're getting to the gist of my question, but continue,
Okay,
please.
I can try again if you,
No, I know that you have to go out and talk to various entities that supply money to the county, to
Correct.
this, or whatever. And I'm assuming that you don't know completely where you're going to get all the money in the next 6 years. You're
that's correct.
that's the only answer that I want.
That's correct. These projects are not, as we talk about them tonight, there may be a few in here, but for the most part, they are not fully funded projects.
Okay.
Happy to come back to this if you'd like.
Yeah, no, continue.
So again, we talked briefly about the 4 types of projects. So digging deeper a little bit into what the corridor projects are in these projects that are above the line that I talked about, there's 6 of them that are corridor projects. The 2 Newport Way projects, which we've, for the new members, be less familiar with those, but there's a portion of Newport that is west of SR 900 to 54th, along where the new projects, the apartments are that you see along the freeway. And then there's the other Newport project, which goes through the central part of Issaquah from Maple to Sunset basically through the valley floor. So those are, again, as I mentioned, those are big projects, partially funded with grant funding, and we have enough money funded currently for design, and we're working to get a package together that would be both design and right-of-way acquisition, but beyond that, the construction, which is the big dollars, we don't have that figured out yet. So Gilman Boulevard is a preliminary design. We started last year asking Issaquah residents and businesses what Gilman should look like in the future. We didn't have it. We didn't start with a design. We started with a question. So this work that we're doing now is phase 2 of that, and it's moving towards a preliminary design that would include cross sections. That's helpful both for us planning projects going forward, and also for development as it comes in along that corridor. We can more accurately condition development on the kinds of improvements they need to construct along Gilman if we have a design for that, which we currently do not. So the I-90 crossing is a huge, big project that we think is really going to be very beneficial to the city going forward. And I've got these on a map here, and I'll show you in just a second. But that's a crossing of I-90, probably going underneath the freeway. We would actually raise the freeway in that area, and our crossing would be at grade going underneath I-90, and that would connect the two, both the north and south side of Issaquah. So really an important project for connectivity. Tibbetts Valley Park frontage is the companion part, I guess you would say, to the Tibbetts Valley Park project that the Parks Department has worked on. And then Front Street Streetscape is the next phase of the work that we're doing on Front Street to complete those streetscape improvements. And here's where they are on the map. The Newport Way 900 project, as I mentioned, is that portion west of I-90. It doesn't go all the way to the city limits, but it's a pretty big chunk of that corridor. Tibbetts Valley Park frontage is right on the other side of 900, right in this area. The I-90 crossing is purposely a big oval there because we don't know exactly where that crossing should go. We've got it in our plan here because we know that getting started on that is important, so that we can decide if we know where that crossing's going. That can really help us as development comes in. Also, we know it's a ways out, but we know that light rail is coming to Issaquah, likely down the I-90 corridor, so it's going to be coming in this way. And it's although we haven't gotten to this point, we know there's going to be a station, a stop in Issaquah, and it may be in this area as well. So the more we understand what we want in this area, the better for development as it comes in, the better for Sound Transit as it moves forward. There's a bunch of benefits. This is the other Newport Way project. Basically, like I said, through the central core of our central Issaquah. The Gilman Boulevard project, which is in a much earlier stage at this point, extends basically from Front Street to 900, and Front Street Streetscape, you all know where that is, but there's several pieces to that project. This is the piece that's south of Alder and north of Sunset, the core of Front Street. So now intersection projects, there's 4 of them in our top part of our list. There's the 12th Avenue and SR 900, Central Park Lane traffic signal, 43rd, which has been known as Providence Point signal, and then Southeast 51st. And I think it may be easier for these if we just go to the map and show you where they are, and I can talk a little bit more about them. Providence Point here is on 43rd. Providence Point is on both sides of 43rd, and this project would align that intersection, which is currently skewed. There's one side of Providence Point enters 43rd in one location, and then the other side enters in in a different location and they're offset, this would build a signal at Providence Point to align that intersection. The 51st Street project is a fairly minor project. That is, we're piggybacking actually. It's a small project to add a turn lane. We're piggybacking on some utility work that's going to be done there. So we figured, well, we've got that street torn up for utility work. It would be a good time to complete that project. It's not a huge project for Issaquah, but it's a project on our list and trying to take advantage of opportunities as they present themselves. 12th Avenue Northwest and SR 900 is, if you're familiar, this is the part of town where I work, and this intersection is where the Tully's used to be, and there's a hot tub store, and the market is over here. It's a fairly, it's one of our most largest volume intersections, and it certainly would benefit, we believe, from some improvements to that intersection. And then Central Park is way over up on the hill, up in the Highlands, and that is on Central Park, as traffic signal on Park Drive, College Drive, potentially a roundabout there, potentially looking at additional crossings. So it's not just, we haven't scoped this project entirely. We think it's more than just a signal here. It's probably improvements in this larger vicinity along Park Drive. So pedestrian projects, they have benefits, I suppose you could say, for other modes of travel besides pedestrians, but their focus, their main reason for us doing them is to support pedestrian non-motorized modes. So I think I'll do the same thing that I did last time and go directly to the map and talk about them. So this is Northwest Sammamish Road. This is what we've called, you may have heard it referred to as the pinch point. So the pinch point is this area right here where you're pinched between the I-90 and the lake. And if you're familiar with this area at all, there's barely lanes for traffic, and that's it. And so there's no really, for non-motorized uses, bicycles and pedestrians, that kind of thing, there's really no difficult to get through, let's say that. So the state, WashDOT has a plan to add an auxiliary lane to improve capacity on, at least for this portion of I-90. They're going to be doing some work all along here, all the way to Eastgate, basically from here to Eastgate. And when they do that, we're going to be getting enough right-of-way in the construction of their project that will allow us to build bicycle lanes and sidewalks to this pinch point, which allows all the people living here and points west to get to the park and points east, which will be a huge improvement for non-motorized users. And so this project was originally scoped and conceived as focused in this area, the pinch point, but we've since expanded it because we know this whole piece here that we show in green really could benefit from pedestrian and bicycle non-motorized improvements. So there's another project here. If you want to think of it as a subset of the Newport project I was talking about earlier, it's a raised intersection at the King County Trailhead, which, if I can describe that exactly, but there's a King County Trail here. They're going to be developing the trailhead, providing a parking lot here. There's some new condominiums, townhouses over here on the other side of the street called Riva that are getting built now. And this is a project that has been always been in this bigger project for Newport corridor, but we're pushing it forward because these townhomes are getting completed. The park project is moving forward. We have plans to build a raised intersection here with flashing lights, rapid flashing beacons. And so that's going to be an important, like I mentioned earlier, for pedestrian connectivity and for pedestrian safety. So that's why it's there. The Three Trails Crossing is a project that would complete this work that has been started by the developers. You probably know there's a development on the north side of Gilman here that's making some of the improvements for this intersection, but they're not making the improvements on the south side. So we know the city needs to make some improvements to complete that that area. So that's what the Three Trails Crossing project is. And the Second Avenue project is is my time up? So that's what the buzzer always means. Is a relatively minor project, but it completes the, it adds a connectivity here at the south side of the high school, middle school area. So those are the pedestrian projects. And then maintenance projects are, they're both programs and projects. So we have a citywide overlay program, which is to maintain our existing roadway system. There's a way that we can measure the quality, the condition of the pavement, and depending on the condition is how we decide where we want to do our overlays that year. That project also has associated with it ADA ramps, because when you overlay a roadway, you also need to bring the ADA ramps into compliance. Citywide ITS camera update is a fairly minor thing, but it's important. We have a system of intelligent cameras around the city, and they're about, I think, 10 or more years old, and so we need to do some updates and get some new cameras. That's fairly minor but important. 66 Bridge, I will show you on the map where that is. That's a bridge that's in dire need of, it's in pretty bad disrepair and needs some maintenance improvements. And Black Nugget Road retaining wall, for those of you that drive along Black Nugget, are pretty familiar with what that looks like. This whole portion along here, and this is not, to be clear, this is not rebuilding Black Nugget Road retaining wall or anything like that. It's just keeping it safe, so that making the minor improvements to keep it in the condition that it's in. There is some talk potentially about development happening along this roadway, and we're hopeful that if that were to move forward, that would solve a lot of the Black Nugget retaining wall issues. But for the meantime, we are just maintaining that wall for safety. And here's where the 66 Bridge is. Not a big project, but again, a safety and maintenance project that those things are always, it's always in our best interest to keep our infrastructure in good repair. It's always much cheaper than building new. So with that, I'm happy to go back to any of this and talk to you more, or go into more detail about projects, or go into this list that's difficult to see. I think we can pull that up from I might need a little help on that if we want to look at that list. I know there's in the agenda, I know that this is in the agenda in the packet, in your packet, but if we want to pull that onto the screen, I might not know how to do that, but we can look at that list if you want. So
Are there questions for Kurt?
I'll wait and see.
Does anybody have questions? Robin, go for it.
Two questions. And first, forgive me on the first question if you've already been asked this umpteen dozen times before. I look at this list, and my understanding is you're presenting that, you're bringing this forward as your preferred. How are these various projects filtered so they arrive at above the line and below the line? That's question number one. So again, if you've answered that 15 times before, just make it a 2-second answer. The other one is, do you have full funding for maintenance? Each year?
Those are both really good questions.
I should retract them then, because that's not...
I would say you had our public work operation folks in here, they would say no, not maintaining. We haven't looked at all of our bridges and all our roadways comprehensively to see what our total maintenance needs are. We know that that's something with it. We're starting to do that much more comprehensively than we ever have. For example, just to give you an idea, we don't know what our sidewalk maintenance needs are. We haven't until recently, but Bennett, our operations guy, has just recently had his crews go out and actually visually inspect every mile, every every foot of all our sidewalks, take pictures, document what the condition is it a tripping hazard, is it breaking apart, are trees pushing it up? So, which is great. We need to do more of that, I think, to really get a handle on, so that, at least we know to picking on sidewalks, because that's one part of it. It's obviously there's more to transportation infrastructure than that, but now we're starting to get an understanding now of what those maintenance needs are for sidewalks. And then the next question, the big question, of course, is, what's that cost and what's the appropriate way to address that? Should you have a sidewalks maintenance program where you go out and maintain, that's funded of some amount, $1 million a year, and you go out and maintain sidewalks? And you prioritize that maintenance by how bad the sidewalks are, and you somehow, but to be clear, we don't have that in place now. But we recognize the need for it, we are working on it. So, does that answer that?
That was that question, absolutely, yes.
And then with
In
your
other
other-
words, how do these projects arrive above the line here and
Right.
below the line?
That's a great question, and I can answer that, and I can answer that question, and I can also tell you what we're doing in transportation, which may be long-term even a better answer. These projects have come to this list in a variety of ways. So I've been at the city for a little over 3 years, or about 3 years, and so these projects have always been there. And that sounds a little lame, but the reason they've arrived on this list is a variety of ways. Over the years, they've been council priorities, they've been community priorities. They've made it onto the list because we need to address concurrency, for example, make sure that we're building a transportation system that's concurrent with development. So some of the projects on this list are addressing those needs. They come to the list from a variety of. They come into the list in a variety of ways. So that's sort of how they've historically how we've done it, and that's what the list that you're looking at here is. That's what it is. The good news, I think, is that we are embarking on a transportation master plan, a master mobility plan we're just getting started on, and that's looking comprehensively at all modes of travel and how we want to prioritize our transportation, how we want to prioritize transportation in Issaquah. So that will, clearly that will, when we get to the end of that plan, which we're hoping to be done with that by the middle of next year, that will clearly give us a lot more insight into which projects should be on this list, which shouldn't be. I'd love to come to you and say, well, the reason that these projects are here is we have a transportation master plan just adopted by the council, and it suggests that we work in these areas, and these projects support that, and they all fit together. And we're not there yet, but we're working that way.
Okay, thank you.
Kurt, correct me if I'm wrong, but part of how a project gets above the line is really funding. So we can prioritize something as much as possible, but if there's no funding foreseen, then it doesn't really make it up above the line. Is that, would you?
So, yes, that's pretty accurate. And to be totally clear, some of these projects, even above the line, are not fully funded.
Right, so I think that's part of addresses kind of like how these got separated into the order that they are, to help you walk through it.
So we could take it, the ones below the line there's been no consideration of funding or new dollars and cents put in
Yes,
at all, is that
I
right?
think that's, and we say that the other thing, just to make it a little more confusing perhaps, is we say it's not a prioritized list. So now we have, I think you could argue that the projects above this line, the projects I've talked to about tonight that have some degree of funding associated with them are our priority. They are on our 6-year plan going forward. You can see that they have funding laid out over the next 6 years. As you said, the projects below that line we haven't started to have those conversations yet. But just to reiterate, those projects, all the projects we say, this is not a prioritized list, although when we complete the master plan, that may help us have a better prioritized approach to these projects.
So I wanted to say thank you for the project descriptions. In past years, sometimes we've only gotten the spreadsheet, and that's led to a lot more questions from us, and so always more information is better, so I appreciated that this year. But we have requested in previous years that it would be nice to see where the money's coming from. So it sounds like we've heard mention that there is documentation about that, so it's nice to know what % of this is coming from a grant, what is coming from the city, what portion of it is funded, so that nitty-gritty isn't given to us this year or past years. But again, I want to put in that request that next year that we include that document. That's always nice to see and kind of understand that breakdown as we're going through details.
And, yeah, and we actually, I don't know process-wise how that works exactly, but we have that. So the sheets that you have,
The description of the projects, yeah.
each project that in this list has a description with it. There's a second sheet, actually 3 sheets for most of these projects. There's a description. I think we've tried to put in a map of where the project is as much as possible. And then there is another sheet, a budget sheet that I think gets to what you're asking about. And
Yeah, so just as again, just a personal note, next year, would love to have that
Sure.
additional piece of information when we're going through it. We're not scared of big packets here, so feel free to add on to us. I have a couple questions about the specific projects, if you're
Sure.
ready for those. Last year, the camera system was recommended to be funded. Clearly, it didn't get funded, and now we're not showing any funding for it, yet it's above the line. I was curious where we're at on the camera system, why maybe it didn't get funded last year, and then now it's kind of in no man's land. Is there, I
Right,
understand the need, but I'm curious what the realistic, why it's kind of above the line right now.
Right, and I think it's important that we upgrade the cameras, first of all. I think the reason that we're not showing funding in our transportation, I'd have to double check on this, but my understanding is that's being funded through the PWO, through the operations budget. It's not
Right, it's not
forgotten.
even, that's what we were told last year, and then I'm surprised to still see it, I guess.
Well, let me follow up on that
Okay.
one specifically. I'll get that information to
To Trish.
Christian so you can.
The 2 projects that you mentioned that go along the Lake Corridor, one that we're gaining from that pinch of redesigning on the 90,
Point project,
and one that's specifically regarding our development agreement with Costco for that intersection. I remember when we did our tour talking about how that was a big need in our city and how we were kind of holding off because the state was looking at moving the location for the park and trying to decide the relocation of the fields and how that was all going to come together. And so it was kind of a pause. I was curious now that we're seeing these 2 projects on, if we're moving forward anticipating that it'll all get drug up in the next decade when it gets redesigned, or if there's been movement on that project.
Right, the EIS for the Sammamish State Park is starting to happen now.
Okay.
And so I think that'll talk about, at least I haven't heard that it's not talking about the entrance anymore, or all those pieces. So, so while that's moving forward, I think Kurt's projects aren't starting immediately either, so those are sort of together.
Okay.
So that you don't have to do something over again. But the EIS, I know we've been in discussions with the state park to start the EIS on all that.
Right, so
on
this is
their
all,
parts.
these pieces are all kind of becoming this ball, moving at the
Right.
same, rolling together,
Right.
rather than, again, us doing something that's just going to have to get ripped out.
We're
Correct,
actually,
correct.
yeah, we're actually, like Trish says, we're actually continue to work. I know the directors just were down in Olympia a couple weeks ago talking to the state about the park portion of this. So, and I know we've had continued discussions with Costco on the intersection improvement, and we're having continued discussions with the state on the pinch point area. So
It's a lot of
it doesn't
pieces.
really come out in
Yeah,
this.
Right, it's a lot of pieces, but I love the idea that it's all, keeping those discussions going rather than it kind of butting heads with each other in that area. My other question too was about the Gilman Boulevard improvements. Is this something separate from the presentation that we had got from the consulting firm about the redesign of Gilman?
No, it's the same thing.
It's the same. So obviously this figure that's proposed is micro. So is this so on Gilman Boulevard, is this starting that whole redesign of Gilman Boulevard? Is that really what it is? Is that we're now starting that project, but we're just starting from one end and kind of expanding? How
so-
does it loop into what we've already have seen?
So what we've done so far is we have worked with the community to come up with some guidelines, some ideas of what the character, I would say, of Gilman should be going forward. And we haven't started design on that because, well, for a variety of reasons. One being that the community and council was pretty clear that don't come in with some design and share that with us. Let us be part of that whole process. So that's what we've done so far. The next phase is to start the preliminary design, which is still, back to my slide earlier. I guess maybe if I could just jump back here really quick. This maybe might help a little bit. I can get there. Don't look at the blurry slide. So this is sort of, we're in this area here, the schematic, we're still in this, sort of what's feasible to do on Gilman, what's early design look like. So we're in that portion on that project, we're way back in this area. So, and we don't necessarily, we have not decided that we're going to have a capital project that rebuilds Gilman from one end to the other. It may be that the ultimate use of this Gilman work will be to, like I said earlier, to condition development as it comes in. So QFC, that whole area redevelops, that redevelopment builds that portion of Gilman, let's say, and then something else further down the street builds a little bit more on the other side, sort of like Atlas did. And that, in an ideal world, we would have a mixture of a city improvements working with private development to build the corridor so that we wouldn't necessarily be, because it would, for the city to build in a capital project called Gilman would be another mega project that we couldn't do. But in an ideal world, developers would build a good portion of that corridor, and then we would fill in, we would update a signal intersection improvements or whatever that would be to complete the whole corridor.
Okay,
the
so it
overall
sounds like
corridor.
the Gilman project is roughly where we last left off. It's still brewing, kind of,
Yeah.
in a
So it
sense.
sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay. My last point is about the retaining wall maintenance. I would love to have that moved up and funding done this year. For the record, I'd like to make a recommendation to council for that. I think it's very important, and while I recognize that we're, again, just maintaining, not rebuilding, I think that needs to be a priority in our budget.
It's a little scary when you drive up.
Yeah,
that road
it's,
to
yes,
see,
yes.
the water coming down through the,
We do annual evaluations. We have a geotechnical engineer look at it every year and evaluate it. So, but it's a big wall.
yes.
And
Ron?
so Kurt, I have 2 questions. Actually, a comment. Joy here had mentioned about the funding component. It would be nice to, like she said, it would be nice to understand what portion of these projects has some component of funding, like grant funding or something like that, because then it would help us prioritize these. If one project, let's say, is $3 million, and we're looking at it thinking, wow, that's a lot, but, oh, it's 80% funded by grant, then that makes our decision much easier. So I'd like to comment that I support Joy's initiative there. 2, the 11th to 12th Avenue I-90 crossing, which to me seems very low at 2.5 million. I assume that's only a pedestrian crossing and not a motorized crossing?
So that's not, this is the project to go under the freeway, and
Right.
I think it's probably 10 times that number, if not more. This work here, to build that crossing, this work here is to get started with, again, using this diagram here, that budget, that budget is to do this work in here, to see what's feasible, what we could possibly do there, what going over or under the freeway might look like. We think under, and start with schematic design. That's what that work is. So we're not anywhere near this portion here, which would be a substantial, big number. The one, again, following this little simple layout, what doing some work here does help you with this box here. It does help you with the funding part. If you can, the more you know about what you want to do, the more you can get partners, especially if Sound Transit starts moving forward with, we don't know where they are exactly. We know that light rail is coming to Issaquah in 2041, I think is the date that we're using now. But the more that we can, better that we can define what we want in that area, the more likely we are to get partners, either the state and or Sound Transit and others, to move that project forward. So that this is not, what you're seeing here is not the construction of that project, which it would be, you identified that correctly, it'd be way more than what you're seeing here.
Yeah. Are we actually trying to fund this too soon? Because if Sound Transit is coming in around 2040, 2035, it seems like we could use this money for other projects that are more immediate, like, for instance, the Providence Point intersection, which is not funded yet. Right. And this intersection may, or this pedestrian crossing may actually become a component of ST3, because we don't even know where ST3 is going to be.
Right. So those are all I think those are very valid comments, and that's one way you can look at it. I think when we're talking about it here, the way we're looking at it is that all this work that we're doing on Gilman, and we know that Gilman is likely to redevelop sooner than later. We know that Sound Transit's likely coming in on I-90, and likely, we got the transit center right down here. It's likely to have a station area somewhere in this vicinity. We know from how Sound Transit's worked in other communities, like on the east side especially, that the more clarity the jurisdiction can bring to the Sound Transit table, the more likely we are to get closer to what we want. So one way to think about it is that Sound Transit's building a rail system. That's their primary, they're connecting communities, and then they have a station. So I think they have ideas about where that should be and what they need, certainly, but I think that it's our community, it's Issaquah that they're serving. So I think the more that we can provide guidance and clarity to Sound Transit, let's say, the better off we are. So you can say, it's too soon. I mean, you can argue the point about when it's appropriate to start that work.
So you're basically what the point you're getting to, it's money in the bank right now. So if we spend the money now to research this out, then we may not have to pay for this crossing, because we'll be able to say, hey, Sound Transit, we know exactly what we want, and this is the expectation, and
I think we'll just be better prepared is really what it is, because right now we're still entertaining a lot of ideas. And so, like Kurt was saying in these early preliminary discussions, I mean, it's easy to kick the can every year because there's obviously so many things that we need to do. But I think the idea is to start small and start figuring out what ends up working best for us long range.
The other thing I wanted to just mention is, I don't remember if that ended up in the final strategic plan or not, but I know it was discussed a lot.
Yes, it did.
It is in the final. So
Under growth and development.
That's a key core idea in our strategic plan, which council just adopted, is to understand where light rail is going to be in Issaquah.
Right, and just to add a footnote to that, it's also, that project's in the central plan, which was adopted back in 2013. So we've been talking about a crossing, whether it's over or an undercrossing of I-90 since then. And so it's just building on it, and now we finally are putting some money aside to start looking at it, which I think is pretty exciting.
well, I do too.
And this just isn't that helpful to say that it's this. I mean, we need to understand that better. And this is about where we're at right now. And this is the money that we're talking about is meant to help narrow this down and better define it.
Yeah, okay. And I was just curious on why we're having that conversation now, but now that I understand it, I agree. My other comment here about the Black Nugget Road retaining wall, how much of that is actually coming from other sources? And shouldn't we be pushing back on King County for that, for building an inferior product?
Well, now I think you're getting into an area that's sort of outside of my area a bit, but that's certainly something I'll talk to my director about that. I don't know when we took over that part of town and that was constructed, you're absolutely right, by King County. I don't know what all went along with that. If when we took that over, it all just became ours and they washed their hands of it or what, I don't know. But I do know that it's ours now to maintain, for better or for worse. And I do know it's something we want to be very careful that we maintain that in a safe way.
I just think that we shouldn't necessarily get stuck with the bill if they
I
went to the lowest bidder on that.
No, I understand exactly
To
what
her
you're saying.
point, I see water falling out of that thing. And it's made out of wood, which kind of scares me.
Do we grade the retaining wall like we grade bridges as far as A through, I guess, D minus?
Yeah, I don't think we have a rating system for walls that I'm aware of. We do, like I mentioned earlier, we do have a geotech engineer that we work with that I believe every year we go out and evaluate the safety of that wall. So we have a pretty good idea of what it's doing. I'll agree with you that it doesn't look good, but we're not blind to the fact that it's a big wall that is made out of timber. So we're very conscious of evaluating it with a geotech every year for safety.
Anything else?
Just had one quick question. So, so on the projects where, when we're looking at the SR 900 to Southeast 54th, can you explain kind of how we structure what funding we think we'll need when we see, maybe we have upfront funding and then we have 2 years where there's no funding attached to it at all? Is that because you believe the design's going to take longer than a year, or?
So on that one, I think that, let's see if I can give you an accurate answer. I know our plan on that one, specifically on the Newport 900 to 54th, is to get through design. We're currently at about 60% design. We need to get to 90% design before we're really ready to have a bid package. And then once you have 90% design, you can also accurately determine what your right-of-way needs are down that whole corridor. So our plan is to get that project to 90% design, get our right-of-way acquired, and then see where we're at. And that's actually our plan for both Newports. And the construction funding is the big step for the good news. So some of these estimates are more higher level, I would say, than others. The good news on this Newport project, we have a very good idea of what it will cost because we have 60% design now. So we have pretty good detailed cost estimates. We just went through a value engineering analysis, so we're really dialing in on the costs for that project, but they're big costs. They're, some not quite $50 million, but approaching that. It's a big number.
And I'd like to just make one request. This is great data. For next year, if it's possible, if we can kind of code these to what phase they are in the project, that'll give us a better idea of where do we think the city is going to, where does the design, how long is the design going to go? As you just mentioned, kind of as you go down the deeper the funnel, you have your final design, your cost estimates get much better, right? So if we could see, something that's in maybe a final phase or a next to final phase versus something that's kind of in ideation, that'll help us better understand how accurate the numbers look.
Yeah,
I love that idea, to see how far down the rabbit hole we are on a project.
That is a great idea, because you're right. When you look at the list, either the list or the map for that matter, it's impossible. I know.
90% of these
But
may
you
be in
can't
design
really
for
tell.
the full 6
Right.
years. We wouldn't know.
Right.
I think this council needs to know that before they go through this, and
Yeah, no, that's a very helpful comment.
yeah, that's something that's important. I am really looking forward to the master plan, but I hope that it's not just putting these particular projects and itemizing them and worrying about them, but actually looking at the city as a whole and seeing where, even though you don't have any money to do it, at least you know where certain roads are going, so whatever. So I'm looking at the whole thing. The other thing that I would like is, the city, the people the community can look at this and say, well, what have you been doing if all of this stuff still needs to be done? Why isn't my project done? And it would be really nice to take what you showed us last year and kind of give us some idea of what actually has been done. I think that's really important, not just for this commission, but for the community to have that record of, and why. How much money has gone to it? Was it on the list and it looked like it was fully funded and it's not, where it's going? I think that's really important. Anything else?
Kurt, are there any of these projects above the line for which there's a time certain after which money falls off the table? I'm thinking of an equivalent of the bypass for Front Street of 10 years ago. We spent $10 million. So are there any, because one of these descriptions I thought said something about the money's got to be spent or something's got to happen within 10 years. So are there any other projects where we say, no, it's not on this year, it's next year, or for some reason nothing's happening, we're in danger of sort of saying, wait a second, whatever we've spent has just gone waste?
So I think the answer is yes, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to tell you all the projects that applies for. I know that there are some time constraints for some funding on the Newport from Maple to Sunset project, because we're currently working on that right now. So we're very we're all over the. One thing I can guarantee you that we're not going to give back or give away, lose any grant money that has already been secured by the city. So we're very diligent on that. So the short answer is yes, there are some projects like that, Newport to Maple, and it's not all the funding. It's some portion of the grant funding. So there are some time constraints on some of these dollars.
For me, anyway, that will be helpful to know, just in terms of trying to prioritize these. So maybe if I'm an outlier here, then forget it. But if there's agreement, then that would be helpful information. Thank you.
I think the city is going to prioritize them. We're just supposed to ask questions and get to the what maybe things that you haven't thought about and things that we think are more important, or understanding how we're going to get to where we should be. So,
You're asking great questions.
yes, well, we try very hard. So do you have any other updates?
I have nothing to. In addition, if there's things that come up and you have further questions, we'll certainly do our best to answer them. I probably the best way is to work through Trish.
And do you need a recommendation? Do you need a letter from PPC? Or is it enough that
I can't
you've
remember
heard?
what we've done in past years. If we've.
Because usually we do, but I know now with a different process, I don't know if you need a letter.
I don't know. A letter from the commission is never a bad thing.
True.
I don't think.
True.
So
Okay.
sure, I don't know. Just to, if we want to talk about process briefly, in the past, for those of you that were involved in this in past years, until I think last year, there was this process called the TIP, which is what I'm talking about with you tonight. And that went through a process coming to you, talking about projects and getting adopted by the council and then sent off to the state. And so what we're doing a little differently this year, we're still doing that, but it's within this broader umbrella of it's within this broader umbrella of the CIP adoption. So, and I don't know, like right now, we're still talking about how that's all going to work with the council and the adoption. My understanding is that in July, when the capital improvement plan is adopted, that will also be the adoption of the TIP. So the reason I'm not to add to the confusion, but in the past, this guy was over here himself, sort of independent of the capital improvement plan, but now it's all rolled into one.
I'm not sure if we could write a letter. A letter would only be, we heard a great presentation, we understand the process, and go and fix everything. So I'm not sure.
Right. The only specific recommendation I heard was Joy wanting to move up the wall. But that's the only change that I heard. But I don't know if everyone agrees with that as a recommendation, or if you want to talk about that, or
Well,
what's your
the other
what's your
thing is
feeling?
I think that as soon as possible, we should have a master plan for the city. I think that's critical in the development of the city before some 30-story building is built in the middle of the best way to put some transportation through the city. So those are the two things that, besides that, you know, if you feel, or if any of you feel it's necessary to forward any kind of a letter to council.
I think that's it for council. I think our only other comments that we had were specifically for staff about next year when we get to have the
Right.
joys of going through this, of kind of giving us.
Right, and that wouldn't have to
Info.
go to council. That's just for us, right?
Now, does council have to have a recommendation from us that we've,
They don't have to, as Kurt said, because now it's part of the whole capital
So,
plan versus transportation, so it's only if Kurt would
That's
want
what I thought
one.
we were supposed to.
That's part of it's in the memorandum.
Right.
so I'm sure that every member of the city council will watch this meeting and listen to all the questions we've had, and hopefully they will have some more to make the process even better, so
So no letter?
no.
Okay.
So thank you for your time and all your work, and just make it all happen.
Okay, and thank you, and thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for the great questions, really good comments. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kurt.
Excellent.
So we're going to move right into a presentation by Kristen on where the housing market is in Issaquah, what the city's doing, what they plan to do, and how we're accomplishing our goals. Or we can watch NCIS.
Well, really quickly, I thought I would pull up the housing report card as well, just in case we want to go to that.
Can you get Netflix up there? Yeah. But training we'll do down at the table, so we don't want us jumping up and down.
There we go. Ooh. There we go. Hi, my name is Kristen Leeson, and I am a senior planner with the Development Services Department, Long Range Planning Division, and I work with Trish. I've been here since about 2001, minus 2 years, but you will see a lot of me. Welcome to the new commissioners. So the housing report card, that's what I'm supposed to talk about, and I'm going to, but I want to take a step back for a minute and talk about how we got there with our housing strategy work plan. So this is actually the first, our first report card was in 2015, and it was supposed to be only an affordable housing report card. And then in 2015, the state mandated that cities establish housing strategies. So we started that process in 2016. And then the moratorium came up, which said the city needs more affordable housing. So during all this, we didn't do housing report cards because we were reporting so much information for the report card that we didn't have it. So once the strategy work plan was done, it said we want a housing report card, not just affordable housing. So this is the first of its kind, so there may need to be some tweaks that you all may want to recommend. We'll see how that goes. The report card follows the work plan, strategy work plan, and its key problem areas, which are the evolving housing market, or key challenges, evolving housing market, growth, affordability, and vulnerable residents. We'll get into that in just a minute. So the work plan, to establish it, we worked for over a year, first with focus groups, which included large businesses, local businesses, service industry, seniors, the school district, realtors. We talked to all those different groups to find out from their perspectives what the housing issues, problems were. We also then took these to, we had joint meetings, 3 of them, with the Planning Policy Commission, the Human Services Commission, and the Economic Development Commission. Those were really interesting meetings. We brought everything that the public had said and the focus groups had said, and the conversation from these 3 very different groups, I think, produced a really good housing strategy.
I think we had 5 of those.
Oh, excuse me, we had 5, not 3,
Yeah.
of the joint meetings.
They were big.
They were very big. So what we came up with, what they came up with, were 3 problem statements with housing. One is that the overall affordability housing in Issaquah and in the region has decreased at all levels, so people couldn't afford to live here anymore. Individuals and families can't afford to choose to live and to work in Issaquah, so maybe they worked here, but they couldn't afford to live here. And then housing types weren't meeting a diversity. There was a whole missing group of housing types that we needed. So in order to address these, we came up with 9 different strategies. And the first one is to remove barriers to facilitate the construction of accessory dwelling units. And those are like mother-in-law units, things that might go over garages or might go in your basement. They're smaller units. They're not duplexes. They're different than that. So number 2 is to provide a variety of approaches to limit and mitigate tear downs, because what often happens is a house will be torn, an affordable house, market rate house might be torn down, and a much larger house is put in its place, or several new houses that are more expensive are put in that place. Seek out affordable multifamily projects for retention as affordable housing options. So go out and inventory, see what multifamily projects we have out there, and what can we actually preserve and possibly convert into affordable housing with covenants. Identify additional funding options for affordable housing, facilitate the development of a transit-oriented development, increase the developer-provided affordable housing in central Issaquah, mitigate the deterrence to condominium developments, incorporate code provisions that increase potential diversity in housing types, and support housing options and services to assist those people experiencing insecurity and homelessness. So in 2018, we actually implemented quite a few of these. The first one was the accessory dwelling units. We amended the code to make it less costly for people to build accessory dwelling units. We improved and sped up sort of the permitting process by eliminating some of the permits that were required. And we simplified and clarified for people what's actually required in the code to build an accessory dwelling unit.
Do those ADUs have their own separate address, or they fall into the?
They do have their own, they do have a separate address. They're required to. Another one that we did was facilitate the development of a transit-oriented development. And this is now called Trailhead. It is proposed to be located right next to the transit center over on Newport, across from Tibbetts Valley Park. The council voted to approve a multifamily tax exemption, which helped to increase the workforce housing that they could actually build there. What this means is that for a certain number of years, the project is not required to pay taxes on those affordable units. Not all, yeah. And we did number 6, increase developer-provided affordable housing in central Issaquah. We amended the code to require, it's called inclusionary zoning, and it requires that with any development that is constructed that contains or is fully residential, they are required to have a certain percentage of those units be affordable. And that applied in the urban core zone and in the mixed-use zone, which is all within central Issaquah. So now we have more to do. We're not done. So in 2019 on our work plan, we have to continue the ADU work, and we are working with a regional coalition for housing, which is our affordable housing. We call them our housing planners. They have 14 different jurisdictions and the King County, which are all member cities, and we're working with those member cities to improve marketing and informational material to help people understand how to build ADUs and answer all their questions ahead of time. Strategy 3 is to seek out the multifamily projects for retention as affordable housing. Strategy 5 is another one to facilitate the development of the TOD, transit-oriented development. So we're still working with them on design and making sure that this can happen. We're also working on number 8, which is to incorporate code provisions into the code to get a bigger diversity of housing, such as cottage housing, single resident occupancies, and micro-housing. And strategy 9, to support housing options and services to assist those experiencing housing insecurity. That's what we're working on this year. So all that, we then had to come up with our housing report card, which this housing strategy work plan said you have to do the housing report card. And we decided to follow the format of that and address the key challenges that we have. So the first one is the evolving housing market. So we have traditionally been primarily single-family housing. About 63% of our housing is single-family housing. About 61% of our housing is made up of 1 to 2 person households. So your standard 3-bedroom, 2-bath, or 4-bedroom, 3-bath house, single-family house, it's probably too big and more than 1 or 2 people can afford. So there's this whole missing middle group where the diversity piece comes in, where you need things like condominiums that we're trying to lobby for and to change the legislation, and SROs and micro units, that kind of housing that's needed. We're calling it our missing middle that we're going to try and get in there. And also, things like our ownership has decreased from 66% to 61%, which in turn means that our rentals have increased from 33% to 39%. So there's been a shift in who can own and who can rent here too. We'd like for more people to be able to own if they want to.
How current is that data?
Most of this goes to 2017.
As I look through the package, and it's 2014, 2016.
Right, this one I think is 26, this one's 20, most of it's around 2017 from the housing report card.
Right, because when we did, the housing strategy was adopted in 17, but we were putting it together starting in 15, and so we had the data that we had at the time. It just took a while to get adopted.
And when we've gone out and tried to collect, Arch actually collects a lot of housing information for us just regularly, but everything lags behind about a year. So I wish it didn't, but it does. So the next key challenge is growth. We're changing. We're expected to grow a lot over the next few years. We're averaging about 360 additional housing units per year. We have, and I'm going to tell you this because it's going to be part of your training later, we have something called state-adopted targets, and we have one for housing and one for jobs. Our housing target, it goes from 2006 to 2031. Our housing target is that we are supposed to accommodate for 5,750 additional 2006 to 2031. And we are, by next year, 2021, we'll hit that. We've grown really quickly. Part of that's the villages and central Issaquah. You've got everything going in on Newport. So we've grown really quickly. Yeah, we've gone from 9,418 units to over almost 17,000 units. So with all of this coming, we need to keep track of this because then you have to have all the facilities and services that go with it. So you need your parks, you need your fire, your level of service is going to change for these. So that's why we need to keep track of growth. So this is where housing was constructed or being constructed in 2018. And then this is where it's expected to come in 2019. This came from the budget that we need to prepare to do projections for finance and for the budget, with the exception of the 2 Newport projects. Those were in 2018's budget, but they hadn't been started construction yet, so put them here. So key challenge, affordability. So the region, the city, like I said earlier, we can't afford to live here. A lot of people can't afford to live here anymore, and we would like to change that. So we are trying to put an emphasis on building affordable housing. Right now, we consider, and this county considers affordable housing to be anything at 80% of the King County median income, area median income and below. And then we also have housing that's more workforce housing that goes from 80% and up. I think technically workforce housing is 70 to 110, but that's going to confuse things. So, but we track our affordable housing at 80% and below because that counts towards our targets of what we're supposed to reach. We have 846 of those units in the city right now. Most of those are located in the villages. We have, I think, 350 in the Highlands and 100 in Tallis, and then the rest are dispersed throughout the city, a lot in the Old Town area. And then we have 192 units that go from above 80%, really they're 100% to 120% is what we have, and those are all located in the Highlands. 60 are under review or under construction, 49 up in Westridge in the Highlands, and 11 are over at the Vale project, which is close to Safeway and Atlas, the apartments over there. 15% of our residents are currently severely cost burdened, which means that more than 50% of their income goes towards rent and utilities. And we'd like to change that. This is, it's kind of hard to see, but this is the location of our affordable housing at 80% and below. This is our location of our accessory dwelling units, which count as 80% units. They don't have covenants attached to them, but they still count towards our affordable housing. We have 52 units. Oops. And this is where our affordable housing, you can see it's all in Issaquah Highlands at anywhere from 100 to 120% is located. The last one is vulnerable residents, and I will be the first to admit we don't have enough information here. And part of our 2019 work plan is to gather more information about services that need to be provided to our residents. We need to do an inventory of what we provide and figure out the gaps and what we can do. So what we know right now is that we do have some assisted living facilities that have been added. We have the Fieldstone Memory Care, Timber Ridge Phase 2. We have 2 new Leo houses, which are smaller group homes, which hold about 6 adults for disabled adults. We have, in our last count, we had 393 homeless individuals within East County, East King County. That's not broken down by city. I don't know exactly how many we have there. But 172 we have in the Issaquah School District, 172 homeless children. Now, those boundaries extend outside of Issaquah. So again, I can't tell you exactly where that is, but that's a lot.
And it's gone up. I just want to make that point too for people who haven't seen those numbers, that number is increasing right now.
Yeah, we didn't have the counts for 2018, 2019 school year. So, but yeah, I'm sure. Because I think last year they were at 100, or 2015, 2016, they were 117, I think. So it does keep going up. And then we have not provided any services or any housing for the homeless in Issaquah. So, that's what I have. Do you all have any questions for me? We'll do this annually. Hopefully we will have more information to provide each year.
So what's the plan for homeless to at least gauge what the potential problem is?
Right. I think
Like even counts. I noticed, I think 3 weeks ago, I saw the first set of tents on a ramp at exit 17 onto I-90, right beside the highway. So I'm curious how quickly we're going to get to the point where we have housing that will help circumvent that so we don't turn into a Seattle.
And I think that's part of our housing strategy number 9 that we're going to try and address this year. And what can we do? What's missing and what can we do?
I have a question. Oh, go ahead, Robin.
Has there been any study done on the population of people that would work here if they could, but can't? I mean, the whole thesis behind the affordable housing, at least part of it, is I can't work, live, and play here. So, yeah. So
that was part of our focus group discussion. We talked to the school district, and we talked to the hospitals, and we talked to Costco, and we talked to local businesses who, a very large portion of our city is retail, which are not among the highest in salaries, and they said so. So we've tried. We haven't talked to individual. We hear from people every so often who say, I work there and I'd love to live there, but we didn't go out and talk to individual people.
I ask in part because it's fine to, speaking as an ex-developer, come in and I look at a project and some percentage supposed to be affordable housing, defined in whatever way you want. First question is, how do I know that if I build it, they'll come? And then, of course, there's all the dollars and cents, which is all the developer really cares about. So that kind of information, if we can provide it or can't provide it, would be it's helpful, I think, for developers to attract. Yeah.
So to answer, part of that is Regional Coalition for Housing, ARCH, has a waiting list of people who are looking for affordable housing but can't yet get in. So whenever a new development comes up, that information is pushed out to the people at the top of the waiting list, and they are offered these units. And if they turn it down, then they move down a little bit. So there is a waiting list, and they will come. They fill up quickly.
And part of our housing strategy too, Robin, was to do a survey, because we always hear from the people that live here, and so a lot of them don't think there's a problem because they have their place. And so we were trying to get to the businesses, to the folks that don't live here that would like to live here, so that we had that data in the survey, in the strategy as well. That's a good question.
So a neighbor of mine is a elementary school teacher, and we actually had an interesting conversation a couple days ago. A third of her classroom are low-income children, and she says it consumes about 3/4 of her budget to be able to manage those kids. With many of them come in with behavioral issues and so on, and she says it's causing problems for her to be able to be effective, because there isn't enough money for her to use her classroom materials. So are we having a discussion also with the teachers in terms of feedback of what the impact of these children are on our schools and the children, how should I say it?
I think the school district has that discussion with their teachers and because that's sort of their world, is how the schools perform. We're trying to get folks to have housing, but you're right, it has so many different rolling issues that come with home issues that that would be one of them for the school district and teachers.
During the strategic plan update or development, we talked to the school district, and we were talking to council about our discussions, but it had also come up that oftentimes when they're lower income, they have to move more often, and that interrupts the classroom as well. So just the idea of getting housing, better housing for people so that they can stay here and then be less disruptive.
Have stability.
It's for both them and for the classrooms. Yeah.
Sure, and I agree with all of that, but my concern is that the information that the teachers have isn't necessarily rolling up to the district to maybe communicate to those of us who actually help make some of the policies, and maybe think aspirationally about how do we secure more money. Because if we have all these low-income children coming into our school district and they require more money, maybe we should be looking at ways to get grant money to pay for these services that this population's, in other words, there's a higher tax burden. How do we acquire the resources necessary to be effective so that no one is left behind, or no one's education is diminished because of it?
Right. Well, again, I think that's something that we'd partner with the school district to try to help solve, is, their role is the academics and the teachers and the kids in the classroom, and ours is to try and make sure that, to help them build enough schools so that, there's not so many portables and whatnot, and to try and help house folks that don't have housing in the city, but that are, certainly going to school or trying to go to school here. So it would sort of be a partnership.
Right, and I agree. I just worry, because she was extraordinarily frustrated, because it seems like
yeah.
she's not being heard. And so I know that I won't get into the politics of it, but I want to make sure that we're not blind to the needs of the district versus the needs of the children and the teachers and the parents.
Right.
So building off of the school concept, this is a report card, but I'm not seeing any grades. It seems to me, as somebody who participated in the joint commissions, we're not doing so well on some issues. And I appreciated it highlighting these, but it would be nice to see maybe a little more action strategy of how to come, even if it's just a pass-failing concept. To me, there was two glaring things, and one was that we have done a really good job at addressing affordable housing, or at least making really big steps in the last 3 years. Not so much on that middle. We talked a lot about the changing demographics in Issaquah and having that be these single and double person families, and that Issaquah is changing, and it's not that traditional multi-family needing larger houses that we seem to have a glut of in Issaquah, and we haven't really made any progress on that in the last few years.
So I
to be
have two
fair,
things.
okay.
Is one, this is our first report card. So we didn't have a whole lot to base it on. So I think we'll have a better opportunity to grade ourselves on these specific issues next year. As far as the missing middle goes, that is on our work plan this year, and we've started it. So there is initiative there to do it.
There's initiative. I like that it's mentioned because it's something that we talked a lot about over the years. I'm curious to hear as we build and move forward to say, this is how we're going to address it. This is our hard target to be able to say, especially because, over the years we've had residents come in and talk about, hey, I see all this housing being built. I'm not seeing the same thing with jobs. I'm worried about services. I'm worried about we're outpacing what even our targets were from the city, which seemed really big initially when we got those targets, and we're blowing them out of the water on housing. So how do we direct and say, this is exactly what we want, and if we're not getting what we want, then we're going to shut down and not keep going down a path that gives us, again, housing that outprices people and that really limits the amount of uses that we can do with it. So it would be nice to see a little more concrete of this is exactly how we're going to achieve that goal. And I think that goes to not only the middle, but also to the homelessness issue,
Right.
So communities around us have been dealing with it. Bellevue's tried to, have been grappling with how to actually provide an option. And when you start talking about encampments and things like that, I know I was on a trail today and saw evidence that somebody was sleeping just off of the trail, not in the actual designated area. So you have to give people an option. We can't just, I think, continue to not address this big gap.
So if
Right.
it makes you feel better not to get way into the weeds, we do have implementation plans for each of these.
Good.
Yes. So
I love the weeds.
okay. I didn't bring it along, but we do have implementation plans for each one of these. And in fact, we were working on revising one of those the other day, so.
Right.
That would be, I think, really cool as far as the report card concept, to even just say, these are our goals, this is how we're going to achieve them, and so that we know the next year, hey, how did that fall out? If that makes sense?
Right.
Yes.
And as a reminder, too, to add what Kristen said, is in 2017, we figured out 9 strategies. So there were 9 to do in 3 years. And so we did ADUs, inclusionaries, well, you helped do ADUs, inclusionary zoning. We got the multifamily tax exemption for the transit-oriented development. And we did,
I'm sorry,
We started to do another one.
ADUs, transit-oriented development. Are you talking about last year?
inclusionary zoning.
Inclusionary zoning.
And then this year, we're starting the missing middle, which is 8. We're starting the homeless services, which is 9, and we're starting the inventory. So, for the people that you see in this room that are your staff on this, I think we're going gangbusters on some really tough issues.
Yeah.
And so try not to be too harsh that we don't have results yet, because we're plodding along in our 3-year plan as fast as the 2.5
Well,
of us
and like I said,
can
there
go.
our big piece of that affordable housing, I really feel like we're making a good dent. Like, as far as we addressed an issue, we came up with strategies, and we're implementing them, And so
Right.
as we still have these other areas that aren't being addressed, it's more of a comment than a question of saying, how do we communicate a target, and how do we reach that goal?
I think that was a good suggestion. I've got that down for next year.
Thank you.
So just kind of following on that, this seems like something that the city really needs to get their arms around and really look at constantly. And it would be nice to have somebody that's actually dedicated to making sure that, things are going along the way they're supposed to. I know you're in 50 different areas, and there's sometimes not enough time to do a lot of this stuff, and it would be really nice to have someone, I know it's budgetary and all that, but it would be really nice to have somebody that's actually looking at this day to day, looking at the problems and going out, meeting people and doing stuff. The second thing I want to say, now that legislation is passed on condos, it would be really nice to have some type of initiative or encouragement for builders to build condos, because that's one way that people can develop wealth. And they feel that they belong to the city and are more interested in getting involved in the city. So I think that that's a big part of what we need to do. We got a lot of apartments, but now we need condos, so we have choices for people to do this and build their wealth through that.
It'll
Well,
be
and the
nice to see
opposite for
those coming in.
downsizing as well. I mean, it kind of goes from both ends of that spectrum.
You know, I know, but you have to have everything. You have to be, if we want to have a vibrant city, everybody is going to have the opportunity to find something that they want, besides cost,
Yeah.
to make this a livable and inclusionary place to live. And I just think condos are extremely important to the city. And I think through the legislation that, what was it, a gazillion to zero that passed this legislation, that, you know, there are definitely reasons why this needs to be done. And all the cities are working on it, so they're all,
Right.
I'm concerned. I just don't want apartments. I want condos that people can afford, so that they can feel like they are part of the community.
So for those who don't know, back in 2009, so prior to 2009, when people were building condominiums, there were lots of issues with water leakage and other things that came up. And for that reason, and it just wasn't quality construction. And so for that reason, the state passed a bill making it easier for condominium owners to sue developers to fix those problems that they were having. And over the years, it just became easier. It opened up a little bit. So condo owners were able to sue for many more things than they could that it was initially intended for. And that then developers said, I'm not going to do condos anymore, and because of this legislation. So that is what happened, and that is what they just quit. And they became townhomes instead, or apartments instead, and then you have that missing middle because you don't have condos as a part of it. And so that is what we put in our strategic plan to lobby for this year, was to amend that bill to get rid of those deterrents so that people would start to build condos again.
So actually, to Joan's point, is there any checks and balances between apartment ratios versus condos?
At the city level?
The city level?
No.
Well, a little bit. When we do our PSRC is the Puget Sound Regional Council, and every year we submit housing counts to them, and part of that, we're supposed to identify which of those are condominiums and which of those are, just which of those are condominiums. So there is.
There's no cap or ratio that.
There's no
we
cap
have
or
to-
ratio, but we are required
we're
to
tracking it.
note which ones are condos. And they count townhomes as condos.
Would it be wise for us to put some sort of throttle in there to say, we don't want 100% apartments, we want 40 or 60% to be condominiums?
Well, this is when I wish I
That's
had
the
an
market.
economic development hat,
That'd be-
because really it's the market
Yeah.
that drives that.
We want to have options for them, and we want to kind of be able to nudge them in the way that we want
Right.
to, but it's hard for the city to rule the market, because we don't build houses. We try to set the tone so the right stuff will come, and sometimes we need to tweak it with our regulations. That's why there was a moratorium. We tweaked a lot of the regulations for housing to get more of the kinds that the council wanted, the community wanted.
Right.
Kind of goes back to like the things we've worked on in code, like where we've said that we can do storage, where, you know what I mean? Like it's.
Exactly.
We have the tools that we have. We have our toolbox to be able to encourage what we want to see.
Right.
I'm more concerned with encouraging where to place them than necessarily what kind of housing goes in there. I just want the city to design the city and not willy-nilly do whatever any developer wants, can do. I just want you guys to have your long-range plan that said the city is going to look like this, and it's going to be great, and we're going to have this here and this there, and it automatically appears, kind of thing. So
That'd be great.
Can I follow up on page 27 and just go through what you call your actions, Chris? And just so I understand where we are in each one of these actions, there's 5 of them. So I'm not going to read them out because everybody can read them. So are you saying that there are implementation plans?
Yes, there are. Well, there,
Which page? I'm sorry,
actually, he's
Rob?
talking about the packet, and I went straight to the report card, but he's talking about the packet. We do have implementation. It's a table. It's a big table that has each topic in there, and then the steps that it's not in there, Trish.
Oh,
I thought, okay, so is that getting at your comment, in that part of those implementation plans, are we already moving towards a checklist of?
Right, and we have, it's an internal checklist. It's sort of a table for each one of these and what exactly needs to be done and which department's going to do that. And, do we need consultants, or is that something we can do in-house, and that kind of thing? That's what we have in-house.
Probably overkill to send up, to give us that then, is that because I think your idea of a check, how we're doing progress is a great one. So is there some modification of that in future sessions could be provided us?
I think we could clean it up and perhaps,
It's just a question.
so
maybe.
I'm just trying to track, are we talking about missing middle?
no,
the
we're just
strategic
talking
plan?
about the 9 strategies and how we have the implementation tables that
Oh,
we've worked on for each of those and what needs to be done and who's
Right.
going to do that.
right.
That's what they're talking about, is what we have in-house.
We could clean it up.
To be cleaned
Well,
up,
it's
but
back to the checklist. No, I don't want to make work, that's not the idea. It's back to the checklist of progress, and it sounds like that's.
yeah, I thought that
kind
was a
of
good idea, so I thought we could include that next year
All right,
in
so
this.
that, what about number 2, policy considerations that require additional analysis, provide white papers, and you've got some dates, 2018, 2019.
Oh, I know where he
Is that, where are we on that?
Are you looking at the report card, Trish?
No, that's actually in the strategy, and the white papers, it turned out, were actually, it's at the end, it's right before the original report cards. Actions on, of the housing strategy, it's page 27, but on the packet,
It's 121.
I was going to say mine's blacked out
I'm
from the
sorry.
margin. Thanks,
It's
Joy.
121 of 149.
So we didn't do white papers as much as we come to you all, like with the accessory dwelling units. We came to you with the staff report. We let you know what the barriers were. We let you know the code amendments, they shortened the process. It's less money now to have one, to develop one. And so we shared this not as a white paper, but as a staff report on the code amendments. And then you voted to recommend approval to the,
So that's the
to the
process.
council.
Okay.
So it's not as much a white paper as we thought it might be.
Gotcha. And number 4, monitor success strategies and provide the city council with success metrics, is beginning December 2018. Where are we on that?
Well, would be the report card that you're looking at.
Oh,
It's
that-
taken
that
us,
is-
we got the
that is
data
this.
in 18, and then we crafted it into a report card.
Came out a little late, but we had to figure out what it was going to look like.
Right,
What
because
was going to be in
it
there.
was the first.
First one.
And then we'll update this, and maybe we'll have some of the 9, maybe that we didn't get through, or maybe there'll be 9 new ones, or maybe 5 new ones, or whatever, but we'll revisit the whole strategy in 2022.
And you chose that date because it gives you time to go through the entire 9.
Right, because we
Well,
wanted it
is
to
that
be
right?
sort of an accelerated, we didn't want it to be a 20-year plan, because we wanted to be sure we hit the big ones that we wanted to hit as soon as we could. So that's why it's a shorter time frame, and there were only 9. I say only. There were 9 to try to move the needle on in that, I think it's 3 or 5 years. We were trying to really hit those 9. And maybe in 2022, we will have hit 8 out of 9 really well, and, who knows where we'll go with the next one.
Thank you.
I love the idea of the report card because, you know, we've talked a lot about how the community is changing and growing and everybody having different opinions about it. And I think it gives a really concrete way for citizens to see not just there's these giant buildings coming up, what are these changes? We're able to actually see how these micro changes kind of contribute to the whole. I'm curious if we're going to be doing the same thing with like a jobs economic report card.
I'll ask economic development if they're going to do that, and then if they do, they can come present it.
Okay.
Yeah, because we shouldn't have all the fun.
Right.
With our report
Share
cards.
the fun.
Share the excitement.
We will be coming, though, sometime this summer with the Central Issaquah Monitoring
Yes,
Report that's
we do see
in
those,
process,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I have a
Comments?
question. The people that are already in affordable housing, do we know if they are not spending more than 30% of their budgets on that?
They are
housing?
required, they are required when they go into purchase or to rent, they have to prove what their income is. So we know that as they go in there, they are. As far as monitoring beyond that, I know that there's talk about doing some additional monitoring annually to ensure that they still comply with it.
Gotcha. When they purchase, is there a cap on how the house appreciates or the condo appreciates?
Yes, there is. There is a formula. Oh, I had to do it yesterday. Arch usually does this for me, but it's based on the original purchase price. Plus, you look at market rate and how much that has increased, and then you get a percentage. Add those two together, and you get a percentage of it, or something like that. But there is a definite formula that is used.
And it's in the deed,
Cannot
is
get
it?
market rate. Pardon me?
It's in the deed.
There's a covenant that's attached to
Right.
each one of these units that is sold and rented, and that's where it's defined.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Welcome.
We've talked about that too in terms of one of our strategies of being able to help people remodel homes and be able to stay in place rather than having tear downs. And the idea too is to have some sort of accountability so that taxpayers aren't footing people to basically flip a house and then sell it and be able to take that profit. It's specifically for vulnerable members of the community to be able to stay in homes that need to have upgrades and things like that. So we've kind of talked about other things related to that.
That's part of strategy number 9.
Anything else from you guys?
Yes.
So, thank you, good work. Having the meetings with all the different organizations, I think did a really good job of understanding where we are and what we need to get there, so, and it was interesting to be part of one of them. So, as you notice so far tonight, we have not followed the agenda. So when you're a chair, you can basically, they look at you and say, oh, don't do that, but you're chair, so you can do whatever you want. So at this point in time, I would open it up to audience comments, but seeing nobody here, I think we're just going to go through.
We can move into training? Do you want?
Yeah, we're going to, actually what we're going to do is have the
Elections.
election for chair and vice chair. And so I would like, the chair would entertain any motion for anybody.
Hang on. The role of the chair. Do you want to go over that?
Oh, you want to go through that?
Oh, do I
Okay.
want to go through
Well,
that?
if we would have read our packet, we would have read it in the bylaws, though.
Awesome. You get a bonus points. So what
true,
is the
it's in
role
there.
of the chair?
Pages of it.
So
Good job, people.
after listening to all the comments tonight and the concern and interest, I think that everybody here has read every word
Yes,
of that.
every
So,
word. So I don't have to
actually
say.
have read it, but I forgot that it was in there. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew what the job was and whatever. So at that point in time,
Yes, now you can.
now I can open it up to recommendations or nominations for, and we're going to do the chair first. So does anybody have a nomination?
I do. I would like to nominate Joan to be the chair. As the second longest serving member of the Planning Policy Commission, I found her leadership to be excellent. I've served on a couple different commissions, and I'll tell you that the chair really flavors how these meetings go. And I'm a big proponent of how Joan runs our meetings, and I look to her to be our fearless leader both in here and outside. And I would nominate Joan to continue in the role if she would accept it.
Before anybody seconds that motion, this is my last year on the committee.
2 years, right? Aren't you?
No, one.
So your slot that you're filling is only?
No, it just the way things worked out. So anyway, this is my last year, and so I don't know if you would want somebody else to take over. I mean, I certainly, I enjoy being chair. I do, but it's up to you who you want to be chair, understanding that this is my last year. I don't know if, you want to groom somebody else, I don't know what you want to do. So does anybody else have a recommendation? Does anybody else want to be chair?
I think several of us would be happy to share that role. If you were not inclined to, I don't think then that chair would sit empty. But I would again state that I think that your leadership is wonderful, and so maybe that just puts more pressure on vice chair.
Wow. Well, it's up to you guys what you want to do, and so I will do whatever you want to do. Again, I will ask, does anybody else have any?
So I have a question for Trish.
Yes, I can't be the chair. I'm kidding. Ask your question.
Well, I second the motion for Joan, but if Joan doesn't want to do it, or if she wants to kind of maybe groom someone else, can we put these positions in our rotating so they're not locked in for a year? So in other words, we could be shared?
The bylaws say you have to have a chair and a vice chair. And I think we talked about it at another time. And we can certainly have people do those kinds of duties, but there has to be a chair and a vice chair, and they have to be the same for the whole year.
Understood.
So there are several people that are not here tonight. There are 2 members, one person that has moved over from the Development Commission, has been on the Development Commission for a long time, and
2 new people.
2 new people, but who
And then
else
Jason
isn't
got
here?
moved to regular.
From being an alternate. Oh, you're right, Randy. That's the same. That's.
Yeah, Randy
I
from
didn't make
DC.
that connection when I was reading the names.
What?
Randy
Yeah.
coming over from.
Yeah, Randy's coming over. So,
Are you proposing that we hold off until we have a full?
no,
Oh.
I'm just wondering if maybe there's somebody that isn't here that you might want to consider, at least for either one of the positions, so. Okay.
You got a fan club.
Yep.
Just got to own it.
Bylaws state the vote happens on the first day of the new term.
Yeah. I love
have been
that
here.
you've read the bylaws. I'm so
Okay,
impressed.
well, would somebody like to vote on it?
I will second the motion to have Joan as our chair.
Since you are technically the vice chair, why don't you call the roll, or call the,
Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those abstain? Incline? Nope. Motion passes. Joan, you are our new chair,
Huzzah!
our new old chair.
very old. That wasn't very nice, but very old. Okay, so you need a vice chair. You can continue on, you can, what is your pleasure to continue on? No, I nominated somebody last year, so it's somebody's turn to nominate somebody.
So
I'm sure I nominated you actually last year.
I'd like to nominate Joy
Well,
Bill as our vice chair.
do you not want to be vice chair anymore?
I'd love to be our vice chair.
Well-
But I also want to share the role, which means I actually got to do it a whole 2 times.
Well, if you could
Last
peer
year.
into the future, would you like to be
Sure.
groomed for chair? I think
Yes.
you would.
Yes.
Yeah. So I would be happy to nominate you to continue to be our vice chair. I think you've done a wonderful job in the last year, and I think you enjoy it. And right now, like we've talked before, I mean, really, knowing Robert's Rules of Order and having a flow of it is really the clutch to the position. So if something happened and we were without both of you in a year, I think that the positions would continue on just fine. So I would love to have the status quo go on. I have no problem with that whatsoever, as long as you want that.
Yeah. I'd like to
I'd be
second that.
honored. I'd be honored to take your vote.
Right.
Okay, so it's, I can, moved and seconded, so all those in favor of having our illustrious Ron be vice chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Illustrious.
Okay.
Hooray!
Okay,
Huzzah.
so with that, we are going to move on to the fun section
The very fun.
of this. And
notes.
I think we're going to move down to the.
Right.
So quick question, is this differ from the training occurring on the 29th?
On the Wednesday?
On the 29th is going to be legal training about things that you can and can't do, the Open Meetings Act, can 3 of you go meet somewhere and talk about policy issues, those kinds of things that I usually sort of skim over, and then I have you watch a video, but the attorney and the clerk actually wanted to give you that training in person. So it would be you and the Development Commission. And it should be a lot of fun to have them here, and staff will be here too, because we always learn new things. And then, of course, you can ask them all the questions that you want.
Well,
But
and years
we need to
ago-
do that every year because of litigation, just to keep ourselves protected on what we can and can't do in meetings.
Years ago, I used to send out emails about when trainings were around the area, and while we weren't required to go to them, I remember, I went to one up in Mill Creek, so
Right,
I'm
and that's
curious.
That's the state training for
Right.
growth management and that, but this is what Bill's talking about is our attorney and our city clerk are talking about Issaquah issues.
Right, so Wednesday will just be for us, it's not going to be something that's attended.
It's not going to be a
broadly.
state thing, correct. And I'll still send you those when they're available, when they're in our area, because those are super good trainings.
So the question comes up that everybody cannot appear on the 29th. So what are the,
Right, then if you cannot be there on the 29th, you need to watch the video and you need to sign something that says that you've watched it and that you're aware of the things that you can and cannot do, so that the city is protected and that you all are protected. If something should happen, that somebody doesn't follow the rules and there's an issue. So we're trying to keep all of us protected at the things you can and can't do when you're doing city volunteer business. And so you just need, we'd give you a few weeks to watch the video, sign the form, and then we're all good to go. Does that sound okay?
Everybody-
If you can't actually be there?
So you're going to try.
I won't be there.
Okay, so you'd have to watch the video, but you could have popcorn and heckle the screen. I mean, it might be kind of fun to watch it instead of.
I would
Are you
say
telling me
there
there's no
will be fun.
popcorn on the Wednesday? I mean.
Maybe we should actually, but you can't heckle anybody though if you're here in person.
didn't we have candy or something?
We could have
the last
candy.
time?
Oh, we
For
did?
training, yeah.
We had bowls.
Yeah.
Right, that was for,
We
that
couldn't
was,
eat possibly all of it.
yeah, that was the Trish training. I always bring candy,
So,
but I did not tonight.
Considering that you're new, you might maybe sit down with Trish for a few minutes or somebody for just, if you have any questions after you view the video. and
Sure.
Just understand, because you don't want to get into trouble
Yeah.
with some of the things that we do and say here, so. Okay, so with that, I won't be here either.
Okay. But
That's
you
why-
have to watch the video and sign
I
it.
will watch the
right.
video.
Okay.
I will definitely watch the video. I will sign my paperwork, and I
Okay.
will ask you any question that I have that
Yes, please
has not
do.
been answered in the last few years.
Sure.
So with that, are we going to move down there?
Yes, we're going to move down to where it's
Move down to
cozier. And the TV audience, just hang on while we all move to our assign. And what we're going to try and do before I leave the microphone, for those of you that are new to the microphones, if you're not speaking right into them, our wonderful guy up in the booth will flash the red light. That means that the world out that's listening to us can't hear you. So try to, be close to the mic. But we'd like you to sit on sort of in teams, if you will, with some veterans and some new folks on each team so that you all can help each other with some of the questions that we'll be asking.
Should we be taking notes, or is there some paper?
If you're on my team, you better be taking.
Good answer, Ron.
I don't think it's a question of winning. So did you
Depends if there's
pick
candy involved.
Robin?
Go ahead.
Did you pick Robin?
I'll take Robin.
No, none of I have to take notes.
Well, and again, this isn't, there won't be a test at the end on, who gets an A and who doesn't get any answers right, because truthfully, as we were putting the PowerPoint together, I had trouble remembering some of them, and that was really bad. And then our staff, our illustrious staff, Kristen and Emily, will each be on helping a team to sort of giving you clues and trying to help you remember, because we know that you know most all of the answers. Yeah. It's similar. But because we're on camera, I can't be throwing candy like I have in the past, which is really sad because that was one of my favorite parts. But all the years I've been doing this, I used to be super great. So you rewarded them? Yeah, when they got a right answer, they got candy. Weird, it works for. So let's see, we have some new and some veterans, and some new and some veterans. Awesome. And again, those that are veterans, you don't have to answer immediately. Try to help, this is for training, even though it's supposed to be fun training, and it's to help your team understand what's being asked and what we're talking about. And again, this isn't the only training we'll ever have. It's just sort of diving into all the big things that we do, and then when we actually come back and amend things or have specific meetings on certain topics, we'll dig deeper into the topic. But this is sort of, to dive off the diving board into the deep end of all the things that Planning Policy Commission does. So don't feel overwhelmed. It's supposed to be training. Who are you pointing at? Say it again. Oh. Oh, okay. And you're getting blinked at. Emily, you want to introduce yourself to the members? Most of the members know you, but Tom and Robin probably don't.
Yes, I introduced myself to Tom and Robin before the meeting, but for the record, my name is Emily Arteche. I'm a senior planner here at the City of Issaquah. I'm relatively new. I've been here for about 9 months, and I'm happy to meet you.
Cool, and she's on this team, and the dividing line is Ron and Emily? Okay. Okay, and no cheating. No, there is no such thing as cheating. But again, the spirit of this is to help folks understand what we do and how we do it and when we do it. And so I think we're going to go group by group. These are all the topics that we'll talk about tonight, but again, we won't dive deep into all of them, but we'll just sort of skim over them, many topics. And again, the real training, the legal training, is the 29th. So you already know this. So, Team A, the Joy Team. I don't know, do you have a name, Joy Team?
That's wonderful.
Okay, the Joy Team. Now you guys be thinking of your name because you guys need a name. What is PPC's main reason for existence? We gave you some clues in some little letters there. You serve as a PAB to the mayor, and you provide G and D for Issaquah's F and G. Through continued review to the city's CP. With a star, notice there's a star by the yellow CP, and Kristen, you have to quit laughing over there. And related LUC with another star. So, Joy Team. Can you talk amongst yourselves of what some of the letters might be? And Emily, remember, you're just giving clues. You can't give answers. I could see what was happening there. I had a sense. And remember, there's some bonus points too with the asterisks. And if Tom has questions, Tom, feel free to ask those veterans what they're talking about. Okay, cool. Well, that's why we chose you, because we knew you would just be a crackerjack at this. Awesome. Let me know when you're Let me know when you're ready to. If you need to phone a friend, you can phone a friend on the other team. I bet they are. They're awesome. That's why they were chosen.
Just go ahead and run off the answers.
No, you need to wait for this team to answer.
Well, it takes so long.
Be patient, Grasshopper.
Bill seems ready, man. We're on it.
What's this team name? You guys are the what? The what? The Bill team, okay.
Yeah, we're ready to fill it.
Hang on, sir, you need to be the polite Bill team and respectful Bill team. You ready to go?
Yes, PPC serves as a.
Oh, you're not, you've got to be your mic, you're getting blinked. And also, Jones, a lot of the mics aren't on, they need to be red.
I know, well, I turned it off because we were having.
Oh, you were pondering.
Private conversation.
Okay, sorry. Okay, Joy,
What was our P?
the Joy team.
rules against that.
Joy's going, Joy's answering?
Policy Advisory Board is our first line answers, and we provide guidance and direction for Issaquah's future growth through the continued review and implementation to the city's, the comp plan, comprehensive plan, and related land use code.
They heard our answers.
And
totally cheated.
Whoa! We got to work on your attitude over there, sir. So, asterisk.
Polite Bill. So work on your attitude.
Well done, Joy team, well done. And how about the asterisks? You get any bonus points?
If you'd like to name these.
The yellow, what would, can you name one of the asterisks that were either the yellow or the red ones?
Oh.
Because if you said that the yellow was the comprehensive plan, can you name any of those that would fit the category of the comprehensive plan? Maybe a smaller part of the comprehensive plan? You mentioned it earlier that also might start with a similar letter as the comprehensive plan?
Oh, like the CIP? If I would say the comp plan also has our central Issaquah plan.
That was what I was looking for. Any others?
Another land use code.
No.
Blood.
Oh.
Okay, that was just one I was
If we get
going
extra
for.
points, we'll keep on going.
Right, and maybe they would, you could throw them a bone and see if they could name another of the.
Strategic plan, the CIP and strategic plan.
Good clue.
Comprehensive plan. City Hall.
Oh, I know, I can do this one. Old Town, our Old Town.
Oh,
Thank you, Joy team, thank you.
I was thinking too big.
That's why we're doing this. Okay, and how about the red
That's like
asterisk?
love or something.
And
This is love, it's the heart
Our
of the
land use
city.
code. Our land use code would be about like, the amount of like permeable space in central Issaquah.
Are there,
Like parking?
are there different, perhaps, land use codes that you know of?
We have different land use codes depending on where you are in the city, so our central Issaquah is going to be different than
Bingo.
greater.
And are there any, well, and you're right, Joan's going to say we only needed to say one, so yes, you get the bonus point. Are there any others that you all know of, any other land use codes?
We're willing to share our bonus points.
Yes.
Look at the attitude over there, we got this going over there. Okay, now when they're
Yes, I know, he's just
pondering,
brand new too.
when they're pondering, I want you all to do that whole thing, okay? So we got the whole vibe going. I'm hoping for some trash talk at the next one. Okay, so can we move on? Does anyone have any questions about how cool it is that PPC gets to do it? Oh, one more. Bonus point for all of you. Name the times when planning policy actually makes a decision.
You have a hearing?
I'll name it in 0.
Got it. 0, you are an advisory board. You don't ever get to make decisions.
That was a lead-in. Whatever.
That's so important, though, because there's so many things that you cannot get in trouble for if you're an advisory group.
Versus quasi judicial.
Yeah, so that, in some ways, that's a real bonus for us.
That's one of the things you'll learn at the 29th.
Yes, yes, it is. So cool. So here it is with all the bonus ones in there. Planning policy does so many amazing things. I think that's one of the reasons many of our fearless PPC members have made it to council over the years, because the training here is from land use to policy to funding kinds of questions that we get in this comprehensive plan. It's just a really great all-around training. So the Bill team, are you ready for the next question? Is this working well? Are people learning things?
Fill me in, Bill.
Good, Bill is nodding. Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Okay. The Bill team. See, and Randy's not here to be the ringer on this. The Development Commission, this is so you understand why you're different than your brothers and sisters on the Development Commission. They review land use actions requiring a level 3 review, and some of you might remember we just amended some pieces of the level 3 review. Joy is nodding her head. She came prepared for this, guys. Just so you know, Joy is ready. And it's described in the LUC and the CID and DS. Can you, the Bill team, name, not only give me all the alphabet soup there, but what are 2 actions that the Development Commission recently reviewed? And they also serve as an AB to the City Council on land use actions. Which ones have they advised the council on? That's the second part. So how are we doing? I see, oh, now only Bill is doing this. Okay. That's good. Okay.
Design services is DS.
There we go.
What is it?
Land standard. Yeah, land use code,
Nice.
Central Issaquah Development, design standards.
Yes, yes. And 2 actions?
Advisory board.
Well, there's still a bullet, though. What's the first bullet? Can you name 2 actions that DC recently reviewed as a level 3? Meaning they actually...
I'm new here, so I'm going to cross my arms.
Okay, that's perfect. I think it helps the, so 2 things that they actually,
CIP?
So you made this
Wow,
question
they're
up
killing
so,
Boulevard, right?
because you thought Randy would answer it all right.
well, I always have it in there because some people don't know what the difference between DC, that DC actually looks at projects and you all look at big picture pieces.
We
And
make
some,
the rules and they just implement.
and they follow the rules, right, but some people have trouble with, they seem like they're similar, but they're so different, really, in what they do and how they review things.
We do the Old Town Comprehensive Plan.
We have like a full board of people. And
I'm excited.
Equation that it was Randy as
Development
well.
Commission, that would
We got
be,
heavyweight too. I'm like,
Yeah, I'm excited.
that would be the
I'm
retail.
super excited. Yeah, we're gonna have a fun year. So how are the
Okay,
ponderers
and
doing?
then
So you
we
guys
have
could
the
get like
retail,
disgruntled at them
land
that
use
they're
code?
taking so long if you need
Not
to.
land use.
I know, I'm teasing. How's it going over there? What?
It's misleading.
Well, it's a level 3 review, I'm thinking as an action, a proposed action. But which level 3 reviews has DC recently reviewed, or ever reviewed if you're having troubles?
Affordable housing one that just brought up.
Not that one.
But you named one. You have to.
I'd take 1 at this moment.
On Newport Way, the Inniswood.
Okay. I believe they did look at Inniswood?
Oh,
They did look at that one?
the IBM building, no, the Atlas.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, Alice, yeah.
Okay, and so the second part, is there also an AB to the city council? Requiring, here's
Advisory
the,
board?
I'll give you the clue, requiring council approval. So that helps you know what the AB stands for.
Advisory board.
Good, yes, yes. Do you know 2 of those, or 1, that they advised the council on?
We did the,
Yes, they are.
we did the old,
Boulevard.
I don't know, I need a,
you name one action.
can you tell what that is? Oh, See, this is why we shouldn't be on camera.
You do understand that you're on video.
I know, but I'm trying to help.
So not the Old Town
It's trying to be my
Comprehensive
diploma.
Plan. That's a plan.
You didn't get the clue.
It's recent.
That's the story of my life, Joe.
That was recent then.
That's Trish's definition.
Years.
Let's see,
It's very
we did
sad. Think of a project.
Can we share with them?
You need to phone a friend?
Those are
Land use
regulated for
agreements.
different things.
Did the land use agreements?
Close, very close.
Oh,
Just change land use to something else.
that was the
Something else.
transit development,
Yes.
the development land use, development agreements.
You got it.
Okay, are they ready to say out loud?
I think so.
And so what is the AB? You said it's a, what was the AB stand for?
Advisory Board,
Okay. And what's something that they've reviewed that way,
Development Codes.
Development agreements.
right? Are any projects that they would have reviewed?
Uh,
They, just a
We did the
hint, they'd be a
Talus.
master site plan? They'd
We
be
just-
bigger than
We did the Talus land use agreement, terminating
development agreement, right?
development agreement, and then we also
Okay.
did the development agreement for Issaquah Highlands.
You're this committee?
But they, yeah, they do, we'll take those. And then the bonus is, how is DC different than PPC?
We're better? Oh, wait a minute.
Well, I'm not going to say that on
Well,
camera.
we are an advisory board, and they're a hearing, right?
But were they listening, Joy
We deal
Team?
with
They
policy,
might
they
not
deal
have
with
been
code.
We
listening.
get that point because we answered.
Did Bill get it?
Yeah,
And
we
say it
deal
again?
with policy, they deal with code.
And so, but what is the key, though, that one of you all can do and the other one never does?
We can't make decisions.
So what does that mean? So DC actually makes land use decisions?
I understand that.
Yeah.
We make
So that's what's
recommendations.
different. That's the big difference between the two groups.
Oh.
So DC actually made the decision. It was not council that made the decision on Anthology, which is Gateway and on Newport Way, and Revel, and Atlas, the blue building. And the first one that went through the central standards was Taco Time, the one on 221st. So those all were totally Development Commission. Council did not approve, they did not make the decision on that. But the ones that they only advised city council are master site plans and were the schools. This was my mortar board hat for graduating, but I can tell it was completely lost. But they do master site plan. They also did Confluence Park. The Development Commission just advised. So very good. Are you ready, Joy Team?
Ready.
What is GMA? I'm hoping you've all heard about it, at least in passing, over these many years. When was it enacted? It's the State Growth Management Act. So that's a clue right there. That's what GMA stands for. It was enacted in 1 year. I'm looking for the year, as it plays into the future education that we're going to do. And it provides a framework for our coordination. It requires C to adopt countywide planning policies to guide cities' plans. And it requires the establishment of a UGA. And the big hint is the arrow is pointing to something near Issaquah that is very near and dear to us.
So the year is either 1990 or...
Way back.
Yeah, we weren't.
Provides a, I think it was 1990, then I could be.
No, I like that answer.
Provides framework for, all I can think of
Look at
is
the map. Look at the map.
regional coordination requires cities to adopt citywide planning policies to guide city plans, requires establishment of a group, urban growth. What?
Almost got it.
Association.
Well, it's usually urban growth boundary, so I don't know what the A is.
boundary makes
area?
that. Yes. Well done. Joy Team came to work tonight. Any questions on your answer?
Are we winning?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. And
That was an easy one.
the hint arrow is pointing to Issaquah. It's not quite updated because I couldn't find a new map. But the red line is the urban growth. Do I have it on the next map? Well, I don't have the arrow. But the urban growth area that was set by the state and the counties meant that no urban services could go beyond that line. One of the tenets of the urban growth GMA was that we were having sprawl all over the place and all the rural lands were getting developed and there wasn't enough water and infrastructure, so they were trying to make urban growth be efficiently done, and so they drew lines so that you couldn't grow, you couldn't have sewer and potable water and all that outside these lines to try to keep the sprawl from happening. And so Issaquah is lucky to have the urban growth line as actually part of our boundary. And so we have the best of all the worlds. We have our urban world inside the city and our rural, wonderful environmental world right outside our city limits. And part of it actually is in the city limits that we've kept preserved. So the city's just in a marvelous position. As you can see from the map, all the green that's around Issaquah is protected open space. Cool, any questions on our illustrious UGA and urban growth and GMA? It's a fine thing. Are you guys ready over there? Name 5 state growth management act goals. There are 14. And think of what they were trying to solve. I gave many hints in just that quick little vignette I did.
Sprawl. Limit sprawl.
Okay, good. The new guy, good job. He's
Arms
ready.
folded and everything, you know?
Woo!
Can't shoot them.
So, okay, there's 13 more to choose from.
How does that translate?
What did we talk about just now with Kurt?
Don't look at me and say, I don't know.
No, I know it's a joke.
No, you didn't say that, no.
So our report card, housing report card.
Okay, housing.
Yep.
Okay,
What did Kurt talk about?
Transportation.
bingo. So, 2 more.
What's outside of our urban growth area? That we're trying to protect?
Wildlife.
Green areas.
space.
Green space.
Green space.
Open space. Protected space.
Yeah.
Our environment.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
5. Still a lot left, 9 left.
Really asking.
We
What about you guys?
What about?
Improve water use.
Well, I didn't think of that with you guys, but water,
Retention. Clean water.
that would work.
Conservation.
Cool. Can you add any of the other 5?
sprawl.
How many are left? 10, 4, 9, 8? I'll take any. What other things would the state have been worried about?
I didn't hear everything. So what goes on inside? Utilities, services, keeping trees, keeping around, talking. Keep talking.
Who's talking? Yes, public participation, big one, super big one. I don't know why I got so excited, and you guys didn't get excited about that one at all. That one's big. Thank you, Ron. That's big. That's
That was a
big
good
in
one, Trish.
Issaquah. I just get so
I'll give
excited.
you a point.
Okay, so what
Okay.
was the state hoping to solve?
These are the 14,
Shoreline
and
management.
one of them, you're going to see in 2 weeks, shoreline management program. Boy, is that cool for us with our Issaquah Creek and the lake, and so that's going to be super fun. So these are the 14 state growth management goals.
Affordable housing.
Any questions? Permit processing is in there. They wanted to be, efficient, fair, equitable. That was a big one back then. Property rights is a big one. Natural resource, to make sure that all the good land for mining and timber aren't turned into residential development. That was a big one. They're all big. Hey, this one isn't really a question. I wanted to put the actual new map of our urban growth boundary, and we only have one potential annexation area left for the city, and that's a small part of East Cougar Mountain. You may remember, those of you that have been here a while, we tried to ask King County to turn that area back into rural because it's not of an urban density. It doesn't have sewer. It would be very hard to serve with urban services. And we don't need that area to put our density in because it's so out of the way. I mean, it's not near any good transportation links or anything. And so we're still working with the county on this little bit. But any questions about our city limits or our last potential annexation area?
I'd like to know what's happening with our previously acquired annexation over by the Highlands that was up for debate as a school zone, and then they decided not to do it.
You're getting blinked. It's on the docket this year to have a community facilities rezone.
Oh,
So we're trying to figure out what we want as a city, what we want it to be. So that'll come before you in, not sure, we keep changing the schedule and everything, but later on in the year is safe to say. But yes, good question. I think the next map, I love this one. Is it back to the Joy Team?
It's their turn.
And you may have to help them with this because this is another one with a big number. There have been 18 annexations since 1990, which is also what happened in 1990?
Growth Management Act.
Yes. Part of the Growth Management Act, it drew the big line, and if you weren't in a city at that time, if you were in a potential annexation area, all the cities were supposed to try to annex those areas as soon as they could provide services. In an efficient way as we move forward through our 20-year plan. And so since 1990, Issaquah has done 18 annexations. Woo, that's a lot. So Joy Team, can you name 5?
South Cove, Providence Point. I had them in my head and I forgot. South Cove, Providence Point. The Highlands. Talus.
Where did you get 5? Keep going if you can keep going.
There was, no. There's a lot of little ones in the city. The state park.
Yes. See, Joan gets me.
Yeah.
That was one of the most recent ones, too.
And then there's a lot of little ones that I can't
A lot of little
think
ones.
Yeah.
But you did super good. Any that she didn't mention that you're more fond of than others?
Lonnie was helpful.
And we do a city
Did we do a
facility, didn't we annex that?
Yes,
area?
the King County shop site. That one? Which is where the
don't remember the name of it.
land, I was going to say the park, which is where the land that you asked about was in the King County shop area. Cool.
King County parcel.
You ready for the cool map, or are you still pondering?
Matt.
I love this map. These are the 18. Some of them are big, some of them are little, but they are all super important to how we've grown since 1990, where we were just a tiny little town,
What's the blue?
being consistent with, at the top, Providence Point and Hans Jensen Park. A lot of good memories in those. Any questions on this?
Accommodation.
This map is also found in the comprehensive plan, which is
So
the
what
house.
is the one underneath
That's
South
part of that
Cove?
growth.
What is the pink one?
Montreux.
Yes,
Can you say Street of Dreams?
yes.
That was a fun one.
Oh, you cannot.
We annexed it right before the
So you
Street of
can't
Dreams
say-
happened up there with all the
Okay.
football players. The Street of Dreams. That was quite a year. This is even more exciting. This is the annexation history of the whole town. You can see the original little Old Town area and then how we've grown all the way around. But that, of course, is way before Growth Management Act. But just shows you that we've just been growing and growing, and getting stronger and better since we were just little. Any questions on this one? This is also in the comprehensive plan.
Well, good question. The brown box next to the original township, what does that
Brown
say?
box.
No,
The one south of it is the
690,
school.
is that really?
Oh, in the green area there. Just
west of the original township.
Okay.
It's kind of a brown,
Uh-huh.
is that, what is that? Is
That was
just
in
a number?
1955. I was not here then, amazingly enough. I know the King County Island is the one to the north of that was in 66 that we had issues with when I got here.
South of,
Well, she just-
south of the old township and inside
That's
Green.
the one there.
Right, there's a cemetery and stuff in it. I don't know what it was called, but the ordinances are all there on the map too.
You
if
said
you
that was
want to-
55?
That's what the,
9,
it
12,
looks like
55.
on the screen.
Okay, I was just curious.
Exciting stuff.
There's your answer.
Hey, whose turn is it? Okay, the Bill team. Growth targets. Kristen talked about this, and remember, she said you should all remember what she was saying, because it's coming up again. The purpose of the state mandated growth targets are to establish a B as to how many new H, U, and J must be accommodated through zoning within a certain time frame. Gives the bonus for the targets, which Kristen gave you. So if any of you had been taking notes when Kristen said,
Yes.
nice, do you know what the B is?
Baseline.
Got it. Hey, do you know the years?
2000.
Something to 2031. So
Yes,
Yes.
well
I'm
done.
not sure what the first.
2006.
Yes.
Well done, yes. And any guess, or any knowledge on the housing targets? Because I don't know if you mentioned jobs, but you mentioned the housing target.
5,700 change.
Well done.
57, 51 or something like that. And as far as job target.
You
was,
certainly get that bonus point. Anyone want to guess on the jobs? Because we did not mention the jobs tonight.
10,000?
Close.
Really?
12?
Still low on jobs.
20.
20,000?
That's
Yeah.
4 jobs per housing.
Well done.
All right, 5750, all right.
Yeah, you were right on. Very good. So this is what our most
Because I
recent
just keep
targets that
bringing
we're
it up all
working
the
on.
time. Keep passing it.
And this information is also in the comprehensive plan, and we update how we're doing on the targets every year. Last year was the first year we actually had to figure out all the job pieces. This will be coming to you in the comp plan amendments. Well done, group. That was a tricky one. Oh, do you have a
Can I ask you a
question?
question about the jobs? Is that jobs of any size, shape, or dimension, or is it jobs broken down to certain strata?
It's new, it has to be new jobs, but they're harder to track because we have to get our information from, is it the state that we get that?
We get it from the, well, we get it from the state, who gets it from the federal government, the state starts to limit it down.
It does not include home occupations, and it does not include a certain level of employment. So like, I think CEOs don't count. There are certain people that are not included, but
There's no
most of the jobs.
dollar strata, so a retail job is the same as
No.
a...
What's the word? It's kind of,
Much
because we have certain realtor, or certain job centers, if you will, that if we said manufacturing, or we said, it would be obvious that they're the ones that have this many jobs, or like the hospital, or something like that. And so they're kind of all, yeah, they're sort of sensitized and kind of in a bucket, so we only get the number. We don't get that 20 are from this venue, and this venue, and this venue, because they're more private. The state keeps those more private than we're able to get.
But we could achieve 20,000 new retail jobs and have satisfied that job target, or is it nope?
It would.
10,000.
But we don't have, right, we don't have that, we haven't hit that, we're not as close to the job target as we are to the housing target.
Right.
But any kind of job would count,
Any kind.
except a home occupation or a CEO.
And some other really
Right. There's a
high-level
couple
thing.
that don't fall into the bucket. Very cool. Any other questions on jobs and housing? And you guys are doing really well. So this is one, if you know, you can just shout them out. I didn't have it as well. But these are people that we deal with, and so we're like, well, who are these people? Because you probably have heard, you read it in the news or seen something, and you're like, well, who are those folks, and why do we care? Who's King County, and when would we ever have to work with King County Metro? Just throw it out there.
Interagency
Transportation, good. What else?
Sound Transit?
They're on one of the, they're further down, but right, that would be transportation as well. Okay, how about Puget Sound Regional Council? When would we deal with the region?
ST3? Growth management.
Maybe a little bit, but remember we just,
Housing, homelessness.
we work with them on that. We just presented something.
How we want to do,
Right.
how we want to do our growth.
Right, and I think we just presented something to you all not too long ago about the future plan, Vision 2050.
Yeah.
So we're working on that now, so that's a cool one. Kristen talked about ARCH tonight, Regional Coalition for Housing. That's a really good one. We deal with them, we work with them a lot. Sound Cities Association, what would we work with them on?
Water? Sound.
Maybe, sound. I think they used to have a different name, and I can't remember.
Suburban Cities
Okay, I knew it was still an
Association.
S, but, so they didn't have to change their letterhead. I believe this was one of the groups that was lobbying for the condo.
Right, and they have many,
legislation.
many different groups that work together, and one is transportation. So most recently, we had a council member who sat on the transportation group for them, but they make recommendations to the Puget Sound Regional Council.
And the last one, the Joint Recommendations Committee, there aren't any clues in that one, but they help with funding for housing.
So
Whoops.
what's the difference between the planning council and the planning board?
They're part of the board, I think, is the higher level that actually makes the decision. It goes to the board, but the council, I think, is the bigger group, is how I understand it.
Maybe there's more cities represented on the council. Probably there's fewer board spots.
Right. That's how sort of the whole big enchilada of our region, those are all the different groups, some of the different groups that we work with. Any questions on those?
Is this funding for housing, affordable housing, or funding for housing in general?
I think it's mostly affordable because that's what you need the funding for. The regular market housing, there's really no need to help. Whose turn is it, or do we just yell them out? Is it Bill's team? Is it Joy? The Joy team? Okay. The comprehensive plan, one of my favorite things in the world, it establishes, and one of your favorite things in the world, I'm sure, it establishes the overarching V, G, and P
Vision.
for the way the city will G.
Vision
Will grow.
and last one will grow.
Yeah, will grow.
You got the G.
Components that you find in traditional
Policy?
Nice.
Growth policy.
No,
That's not growth.
Overarching,
they are.
It's taking a long time.
Close, very close. Go, pump it up a little bit.
I gotta
That's
go
what
back.
she's saying.
Okay, I don't know.
What's a little bit more robust than
Policy?
G though?
Right.
and it's in between the
This guy
V and the
knows it.
P.
This guy knows it.
You want
Do you want to phone a friend?
Yeah, tell us. Help us.
Goals?
Goals?
Yes,
Okay, there we go.
well done.
Goals and policy.
There are 9 elements in our comprehensive plan, 9. A lot. Name 5.
recently been in the last few
Transportation, housing,
Parks, art,
economic development. Oh, land and shore. Is that what you're thinking of? Like,
Land,
oh,
land use, that's good.
Okay, so then,
We'll give it to you.
okay.
And did she get 5?
And I heard one was art, but that, it's really cultural, but that's the
Well,
same,
true,
yeah.
but it's
So
still-
I'm giving you
yeah.
that one too, yeah.
Yeah, nice, well done.
So did we get 5?
Yep.
Okay, can you name the other 4?
I didn't hear the 5 that they had.
Were you not paying attention? This
I
is,
was listening intently, but they were just kind of mumbling.
Parks, land use, transportation, housing, and cultural.
I also said economic
economic
development.
vitality.
So there are 3 left.
Environment, resources, water,
Close, yes,
water.
yes. But they're in a bigger, those are in a bigger package.
See?
Water, you just said water.
Utilities.
Yes.
Yes.
Utilities. And then Kurt talked about sort of the TIP process, a bigger bucket of,
CIP.
Yes,
Yeah.
and then,
they're paying attention. I love it.
oh, the other one, we worked with them on the housing element. There were 3 groups that met. It was Economic Vitality, Planning Policy Commission, and who was the other commission? Resources.
Yes. You guys are the awesomest. Okay. The first letter is an I. The land use code blanks the adopted comprehensive plan. This was kind of a tricky one because it's hard to start the word with a letter. What does the land use code do in relationship to the comp plan? Starts with an I. Sometimes we have them listed at the end of a chapter.
legislature?
Say it again?
Legislature?
Starts with an I?
Oh, that's an I? I thought it looked like an L.
It's a weird. It's plural, so it's a tough one to act out.
Yeah, it's a long one.
A long word, yes.
Implementation?
Yes.
Awesome.
You should go on TV.
This is so cool. So there are 22 chapters in the land use code, which is we call Title 18 lovingly. And of course, since Randy's not here, I was just throwing him a bone that he could name all, probably 22, I bet he could. So can you name 5 chapters in a land use code that would implement the comprehensive plan? What would be ways that we would implement the comprehensive plan? Just ask them for 5 out of 22. Well, chapter, this is the code, though. This is code. So,
I mean, so it's gonna be like parking requirements?
yes, yes.
Okay,
Well, we'll go from there.
parking, design,
Yeah, we'll give you that, yeah.
design, yeah, the design standards. We're just very proud of them. They took a really long time.
Rules, right,
Density? Density? Coverage, land use, coverage?
We'll take that, the zones that establish
Stormwater.
that, but yeah, the zoning districts are a chapter.
You have to have how you manage stormwater on site.
That's more public works, but that's part of the, we'll take that as environmental. Sure, we'll give you that. They're not getting this one.
I'm not sure I know what
I don't, could you?
Zoos?
could you-
We've talked about it tonight, it's come up many, we're doing different ones.
Charades, this is good.
'Cause then you'll remember, you'll think, oh, I know what chapter she's on.
Are you thinking about tree retention?
That's a good one. Landscaping is a chapter? Yes.
Setbacks?
Well done. Which one?
Setbacks?
That would be in development standards, chapter 7. Yep, good. You get credit for that.
We talked about it tonight.
Housing,
Keeps coming up.
I don't know
Sort
what
of.
Building height?
it is.
Sort of.
Some of them are like this. Some of them are like this.
The housing.
Some of them are like this.
Overall,
How many?
I'm going to just quit doing that one.
Height restrictions?
Again, with your the development standards.
What's development?
We talked about it tonight. Joy said we're doing really well with it.
Affordable housing?
Yes.
21, yep, that's chapter 21. There's so many of them. This one was signs.
Oh, signage.
Signs, A-frames. Nobody got A-frame signs? But yes, signs.
Oh,
are-
sign code.
Procedures, we have
Signs,
procedures
yep.
in there.
Yep, the process is one.
We just
So
talked
there's.
about that, too.
We did. But yes, there are so many, and this list will just, amazing. This is the comp plan and all the 9 elements. And then the land use code has just so many that it's hard to, oh, wireless, you could have called that one out, because you guys just did that one, too.
Oh, yeah.
So there's many more codes than there are policies, because this is where the teeth are. This is where the teeth are.
Yes.
Teeth are plural. This is where the plural, the teeth are. Any questions about the codes? One of your jobs is you help us amend the codes and the comp plan. So you get to, as Joan says, you guys get to work on the rules, and then the Development Commission gets to enforce the rules. And Randy's looking forward to actually being on this side to help create the rules for his other team to use. Okay. Hard to read on here. I don't know if this is just a sample of language, that the comp plan language is more aspirational. It's in goals and policies, so we're talking about what we want to get, what we want to have as a community. And oftentimes you've been frustrated because you would like to put the teeth in the policies, and we're not supposed to put the teeth in the policies, even though we would like to have teeth everywhere. The teeth have to go in the land use code, and so there's usually a lot of numbers in the code, whether it's minimum density, a setback, percentage of landscaping, because those are what we use as teeth to make the community turn out to be how we want it to look and feel. And are there questions? And again, this is just high level. Hopefully when we actually get into some of the amendments, it'll kind of come back to you that we talked about these things. Questions? The sub areas. This is Old Town. We're sitting in Old Town, which is pretty cool. Last year we had a tour of Old Town, those of you that were here, and that was a lot of fun to actually be out on the road and be pointing to the different boundaries and the different kinds of housing and the different kinds of retail stores. We just revised it finally in 2018, and we're just now starting to work on the standards, the amendments to that you all put into place that we would do this year. And so that should be coming to you in a while, but this year. Any questions about Old Town? It's a great plan, by the way. Super short, but a great plan.
Did the city council approve going past the creek? That was kind of
We didn't
No.
change the boundary, remember?
Right, you all are
Decided
going
not to.
You all are going to review the boundary 12 months after the standards are amended. That was in the
Well
plan.
done. That's one of the implementation, which I think is one of the questions on here. I think we just gave it away. Yes, one of the brilliant pieces of the update that you put in, you PPC, were action programs, which listed 19 that we're supposed to have done by 2020, and of course that's tons of time, right? 13 short-term actions, which we have till 2022. These are not the same actions. So there's 19, and then there's 13 more, and then there's 4 that are longer term. Can anybody name just 5 of all of those? And one of the gimmies is the code amendments that we're bringing forward to you this year. So I'll give you a bone and give you that one already. Anything else you can remember that you wanted to have done in these years?
Will the signage fall under the immediate?
wayfinding?
Wayfinding, I think, is in there. Isn't wayfinding in there?
Wayfinding is in there. I was shaking my head. I don't think signage is in there.
Okay.
Other than, yeah, because it's not even in the code amendments.
ADU?
No?
No? Something about.
There's a short-term action with the parks plan, isn't there?
Green necklace?
There is an intermediate action, I believe, with the Parks Plan.
talks about
to identify intermediate uses and interim uses for properties that we've purchased and figure out what to do with them before they become
And
parks.
there's also one, Joy, I think that you
There's
helped
something
with
with
the
the
pea
matrix.
patches, though, that you wanted a community garden in Old
Yeah.
Town. That's in there. Okay, I can tell you
we
guys are
did-
getting tired.
No, we did, This is for the Old Town Savaria plan. So we did we did,
That'll be the code amendments, yep. You want the.
that's
to
what
be-
you're talking about here?
Right,
Okay.
right.
So we
That's one
did
of the brilliant action plan.
Heights, we did,
Do you remember the,
cell towers,
no, the, can't act this out, but
Sunset intersection, or
the
Sunset.
whole, yeah, the
the strip?
whole streetscape. Remember, you guys did the Phase 1 and Phase 2, and you wanted it funded? So that's in there, is to get the funding for Phase 1 and Phase 2?
Let's see.
That was very well
The
done.
longer term, is there like Mall Street? Is like that plan?
That wouldn't be in.
No, that's not.
We did the.
It's not in Old Town.
Retail zoning, right?
To have
We
retail
talked
on the
about
ground
it,
floor, yep, that's part of
including-
code. You guys are getting them.
What do we call it?
Oh, we had
Sorry.
a parking thing.
Well-
Council wanted to cut, we had the city needs to go
Right.
back about parking.
So we did a parking
Yes.
analysis, that was one of them, and then the retail,
couple
Ron, was,
parking ones.
one is to allow retail in the multifamily high along Sunset, and the other one was to require ground floor retail on Front Street.
Yeah, well, wasn't there another retail, it was out near Bones Candy? We were talking about a different retail classification for that?
Right, but that didn't make, remember, we didn't
Right.
change the, we
Oh.
talked about putting it into Old Town, but we decided to change the standards and then reevaluate the boundary. But those are all really good, and this is, I mean, this is such squinchy letters, but I can send you the Old Town Sub-Area Plan. You can see, this is just the 19 that we're supposed to have done by next year. And there's many, many, many of them. In fact, I was thinking of sending you the PowerPoint, but then you'd have it for next year and we'd have to change it for the training. I don't know if I want to do that.
Oh, to
And these are
collaborate
the
with
13 that are then in the next years. I think this is where the key patch is, the community garden. Oh, maybe the community garden's at the end.
Can I ask you a question? When I see
Yes.
something like number 4, implement parking analysis recommendation, what does the word implement mean?
Meaning.
I understand.
No, well, we did a parking study. We've done several of them, and one of the recommendations in the parking study for Old Town was that we monitor how we're doing as to providing more public parking and to provide wayfinding signs so people know where they are. Like, there's a lot of parking behind Memorial Field, but it's not well lit back there, so if I didn't know it was back there, I probably wouldn't venture back there to find it. And so the analysis talks about those things, and so what we want to do in the second phase of Old Town is to make sure that we're checking off, that we're actually implementing the things that we've learned from the analysis. And then the last one, there's only 4 for the far out, longer-term actions. But it's a super good plan. You all did a super good job on that. And the Old Town standards, this is just a picture of one of the pages. That's what we'll be starting to work on this year with the smaller heights and the different landscaping and those kinds of things. It'll be another fun piece that we'll work on, and I'm sure everybody that lives and has businesses here will want to come in and help us, so that's going to be really exciting. They're a good group. Most of you will remember the development moratorium because we were as busy as can be. I think for a while we were meeting every week, and you guys were awesome meeting every week because of the 6 items that the council wanted us to work on. You worked on all 6 of them, and you worked on it hard and strong, and you were amazing. And can anybody name 3 of the 6?
Was a qual plan?
No, well, what are the moratorium items that we had to do?
Well, what piece of the central Issaquah
Affordable
plan?
housing,
Yes, the
Right.
housing strategy, yeah.
Ron, what piece of the plan?
the design standards.
Design standards?
I'm gonna keep asking.
The what?
Do you remember?
I'm thinking,
Because you're not near your microphone, so I just hear muttering.
What piece of the central Issaquah plan?
was the design standards, we did urban growth boundary.
Neither one of those is part of the plan.
Yeah.
And
What about when we did like the neighborhoods?
what does the plan do? It establishes the,
This is the moratorium.
Vision?
yes, visions.
Yes.
Visions, well done.
Oh, yeah, just-
That was fun.
Well, thinking fountain?
Yes.
What is this?
I'm as good at charades as Trish is.
Obviously, we need to work on our charades and work. By next year, we'll have it down. Okay, there's, I think, 3 more items. Although urban design is sort of, urban design and architectural, those kind of were blended, so there'd be 1 more.
2.
Building
There were
height?
2.
What is
More.
this?
Oh, then I missed one. 'Cause,
I'll just
yeah.
say vertical mixed use.
Yeah, that's this one.
Oh, is that what that was?
Could you tell vertical mixed use?
And then
Housing
parking,
retail-
under
yeah,
building parking.
Oh, yeah.
Parking, right.
Yeah, we talked about that.
And you worked on all of those, and it was quite a year. And finally, in June of 2018, when we finally finished the visions, that was quite a long process, that's when the moratorium got lifted. So for a temporary moratorium, it lasted 3 years.
You know, this is a side topic, but in our packet, there was like a chart that showed every region and the tools that they're using. I loved that. I thought that was really interesting to see how everyone's doing strategies and whatnot.
Are you talking about the affordable housing stuff in the strategy?
Oh,
No.
I was going
Yeah.
to say. But housing, yeah. We're doing
We
all
do
of them.
almost
Now
all
that
of
we
them.
did multifamily tax exemption, I think we're doing all of them now.
Not quite, but yeah.
So those are them, those are those. This is going to be a gimme because you guys just learned everything there was to know about the housing strategy. Stakeholders, the meetings, oh my gosh, we had fun with this. So you probably can name 3 of the 9 strategies already because we talked about all of them. Can anybody just shout out the 3? Any 3?
ADUs.
We did all this, didn't we?
What's the one you asked about, Joy?
Condos?
That why didn't we do it yet?
Homeless.
And?
In the middle.
Yep, that's 3. Well done, and we did inclusionary zoning was the other one. Any other over there that you know of? Just trying to take credit because we did that one. I'm trying to take credit for
Something
the
next
ones
to
we
the
already
transit
did.
center.
Joan talked about one at the state level?
The tax exemption.
Yep, very good. And the one that Joan mentioned
Condominium?
that happened, yes, so that one's at least been addressed. We'll have to see how it fits in Issaquah, but it sounds like that one, we can start figuring out how to get condos back. I haven't read it yet, though. I need to actually read the legislation to see. But well done, the housing strategy was a super cool thing. These are the 9, just the one-liners for all of them. But you probably had enough housing tonight, but just know they're out there and they're in your packet, and it's a super cool plan. And these are the ones we've done, are the ones with the little yellow stars. Yay! And we're starting all the other ones. Yay! A lot of work's going on, yay! The only one that we're not quite doing yet is 2 and 4, but we'll get there. We'll get to all of them. Pretty exciting. Central is another exciting place. Central is where we wanted to take all the future growth. We didn't want it to go in existing neighborhoods, like Squaw Mountain or South Cove or Oriole. We wanted to preserve the existing neighborhoods, so we wanted to focus the new growth into an area that wouldn't hurt an existing neighborhood. So we thought all the parking lots in Central would be great building sites to infill housing and jobs. So the Central Issaquah plan was invented with a lot of help from you all. Yeah.
Is the Atlas development in the central business?
It's in Central Issaquah. The central, it's actually the CBD is the cultural business district, and that's the little spot along Front Street. But Atlas is in the Central Issaquah, is in that area that had the little map. Atlas is in that group.
So the design of Atlas was required to be within the central business plan vision. I had been told by somebody that, in fact, it was out, but it doesn't appear to be.
It's outside the core.
It's
And
outside
the Central Issaquah sub-area plan has different zones, and the most dense zone that we have a regional growth center designation 4 is called the urban core, and Atlas is just outside the urban core, so it didn't have to meet, like it didn't have to have affordable housing, it didn't have to have the regulations that the urban core has, which is one of the reasons that the council had the moratorium, is they wanted to sort of extend some of the regulations in the urban core so that the next time something goes in that adjacent zone, that they would have to do affordable housing, they would have to do some underbuilding parking.
We learned some things.
We learned some things with the first buildings.
And you had mentioned design, and it also, I think, didn't quite meet their vision of what it was going to look like, which is why we then adopted the architectural design standards that are now part of the plan.
And
or
so,
the
sorry, I'm
standards.
just curious, the one that's next to it, that's just coming up next to Safeway, is that also in that older?
It's in the, it's not in the urban core, the Vale and the, what's the other one that's right there?
Atlas?
No, Atlas, and then there's Vale, and isn't there a third one?
Inniswood?
Inniswood is on Newport.
On Newport.
But I thought there was another one next to Vale, but maybe not.
There's
But-
one down the street on Locust that's being proposed, but it's not.
Okay, but
gotten very
those are
far.
also outside the core. We haven't gotten anything in the core yet, proposed in the core. Because the
Well, the
lofts,
transit-oriented development is inside the
well,
core.
right, but the lofts even is.
Right, the lofts are just outside as well.
Are just outside.
They still should be required to have affordable housing.
Well, now they will. If they go in, now they will. But we didn't figure that when we first wrote it. But good question. We learned from that. So this is, again, the plan, the central plan versus the central standards. So the plan is aspirational, and it has goals and policies for all those things. And the standards actually have the teeth to require the density, the community space, the parking, the signs, the landscaping. So it just shows you, again, same with the comp plan and the land use code. These are the same pieces for the central Issaquah. There's the plan, the sub-area plan, and then there's standards that are specific to central Issaquah. And then, again, the language, that the plan is aspirational, what we want to see, what we want to have, and then the standards actually have the language that has the teeth in it. I know you know that already. And these, still from the central, these are some of my favorite drawings that we used when we were creating central. And can you tell from the picture where this would be?
So Newport and 12th? Maple.
Newport and
But this was to help the
Newport and
community
Maple.
see what it could look like with the way the zoning was.
12th and Maple.
Did you get, yes, yes, because you can see the Maple Street office building right there. Awesome, good eye. And this one. You can cheat by looking at the little picture in the corner. Right at the end by SR 900, yep. And this one. Can you tell from the little picture?
Just 'cause I
You
look
can
at the
see a bit of
background.
the hillside in the corner?
Gilman
middle?
and,
No, it's closer to before the previous place.
that's walk over it.
Like a block over from the Krispy, not Krispy Kreme, the Hot Pot.
Yeah.
Well done. Well, we use those to help people understand and kind of envision what it would look like with the density and the height and the setbacks and the street requirements, that kind of thing. It's still hard to imagine, but we've tried to help people do that.
So quick, go back into
Whoops.
that picture. That's only 4 stories, and that area is actually zoned out for 12 stories, right?
Right, it's zoned for 125
12.
feet, but, actually, that's Raleigh, so
It's
it's actually
Raleigh.
can go up to
Raleigh's is
125 or maybe higher. But these were also done before we had adopted our standards.
So it's just sort of aspirationally, not actually up to the.
Got it.
In a typical year, this is what a typical year looks like. We're super busy, and now that we have a full house, this is great. We don't have to always worry about getting a quorum. If you have questions about any of the pieces and parts, now that there's a Transportation Advisory Board, I'm not sure if we'll get to see the TIP next year, now that they have their own board that does that kind of thing. You'll still see it in relationship because it goes in the comprehensive plan. So we'll still have this discussion that we had with whoever is our engineer, but it might be later on in the year to fit with the comp plan. We'll have to talk about that, but now that they actually have their own transportation board. How many of you were able to go to the transportation meeting that they had? Joan, were you the only PPC? There'll be another one in the fall, so maybe more of you can go. But they're actually working on the mobility master plan, which is really exciting for the city. So they're a really neat group. And AJ, who used to be on PPC, got stolen. He's on that group now.
He's the
so-
chair.
AJ's the chair?
AJ's the chair.
Well done, AJ, wherever you are. Nice job. See, we're just the training ground for everything. And one thing about meetings, you'll get a meeting notice from Dominique, who's one of our super deluxe workers that helps us. It's really important that you RSVP whether you're coming or not, so that we know that we've got a quorum and we can plan how many folks are here. Because if we don't have a quorum, which I think is what, four people, then we're not able to have a meeting. You will learn that in the legal thing. And we'll let you know, of course, if we don't have a quorum, we have to cancel the meeting. But just to let you know, it's not that we're just being nosy. It's just really important that we know and can plan on if there's a quorum or not.
Was there any cancellations this year because we didn't have a quorum?
Many. Oh, I know of at least 2 times that I had to cancel because we didn't have a quorum. They were, I think, at the end of last year. One of them was a public hearing, which was kind of a hard one to cancel. But it just happens when there's not that many members, because we had just gotten, people had left for reasons, so we didn't have enough people. Are there any other questions? Oh, the docket. I thought that was the last slide. The comprehensive plan docket are the amendments that we do every year. You're allowed by state law to only amend the comp plan once a year so that you look at everything together. And so the docket happens, as you can tell, it happens in the beginning of the year. We set the docket, and then we work all year on all the amendments that come through. And this year, this is just a little teaser of what the docket looks like. And there's only 9 to do this year. Some of them may be rolled over into the next year. We've just found out that our stormwater plan won't be done this year, so we won't have to incorporate the new plan into the comp plan. But those usually start to come to you in the end of the year, like July, August, maybe the public hearing might be in September. We update all the population information, and it's a really fun process, and it's like the big picture of the city that you get to sort of play with. So that'll be coming. But only 9 this year. The typical meeting, you get the RSVP from Dominique, and then you get a packet from us the week before, and you've let me know if you want paper or just the electronic, and that's super good. Call us if you have any questions. We're happy to talk it through with you before the meeting if you have questions, or if there's things that just don't make sense or whatever it is. We're happy to help you before the meeting so we can use our time here as efficiently as possible. And certainly let us know if you can't be here. And if you have some emergency right before, try and get a hold of one of us. I should actually give you my text, so some of you text if you're stuck in traffic or whatever, and that's fine. We just need to know that if you're on your way or if you're not showing, so we'll know if we have a quorum. Today you did great. You did the minutes, you did the presentations, you heard public comment. There wasn't any, but everything went well. And then if you ever can't remember what happened, you can actually review the video on Channel 21 on our website. So you can relive the magic of PPC by watching it again. And I'll tell you, there's council members that do watch us again. Some of them watch us live, but some of them watch us again, or watch depending on the topic that they want to see it. So people are watching, so bring your A game. And then what we try and help you all do is follow the items that you recommended to let you know how they're doing as they go through council. Sometimes some things like the Old Town Sub-Area Plan actually came back to you because they weren't quite satisfied with that we'd answered all their questions. So sometimes they send them back, which is fine, and we do a super good job on them. Any questions on meetings? I'll send you the links for this. But all of our documents are online, the comp plan, the codes, all that good stuff. And then we also have a super cool feature on the website you might already know about that we don't deal with as much in PPC because we're policy, but that has major projects. So if you happen to be driving by a site and it's got a sign there that says coming soon, or you can go to our website and see where it is in the review process. And I use that a lot because it's just neat to see, what's getting platted, what's in the process, what's DC going to be looking at. So I'll send you something about that. That's just super cool with the map and everything. There's also a place on the city website where you can subscribe to updates. So if there's an update for development review, if there's an update for, you can have coffee with the mayor, if there's an update, you can actually sign all the different topics that you want to be updated by the city, and then the city sends you emails with different news flashes of, you know, like when 62nd, the ribbon cutting came, there was a news flash so you could all attend, and I get a lot of my city news that way. I think I'm subscribed to most all of them, just to know what all the other departments and parts of the city are doing.
How do you get that? That's
I'll send you the link, but it's called, if you go to the website, there's a big thing that says notify me, and you click on that and it gives you all the different things that you could ever want to be notified about. And you just start clicking and you give them your email, and then and you can unsubscribe if you're getting too many of, you know, one thing. You could say, well, maybe I don't want them all, but it's a really neat function. And then I'll send you the part where you can watch PPC, or you can watch a council meeting again, or you can watch Development Commission. It's just super helpful when you can't always be at the meeting. You can watch it from later on. Any questions on how you do what you do? If you think of anything driving home or tomorrow, call, email. We're here to help because we all want to be successful, and we're so happy that we have this new team together. This is going to be a really awesome year. Anything else? Thank you. We're all set. In 2 weeks, you're going to be looking at the Shoreline Master Program. That is going to be awesome.
So with that, I'm going to close the meeting at 10.
It's what?
9:45.
This is late for us. They don't usually go this late. But we're so much smarter.